Chapter 310. He could not say that the later generations had already used facts to prove the feasibility of the array disk. Wasn't that looking for trouble? By the way, most array formations use connate numinous treasures as the main array. You can start from this aspect and deduce the feasibility of the array disk. The birth of the array disk was the result of the later generations optimizing the array formation for convenience and simplicity. That was the inevitability of the development of the era. What Xianqing and the others did today was nothing more than following the trend of the times. Even if Xianqing and the others did not do anything, the array disk would be born in the future. That was the general trend and could not be defied. Instead of letting outsiders benefit, it was better to leave it to his own family. Therefore, the Jie school would accept this merit. Yes, senior brother. No, I've already done everything. Senior brother, what are you doing? Du Obao nodded, indicating that he understood. However, he suddenly realized that something was wrong. From what Xianqing had said, it seemed that he was going to leave everything to him. What should Xianqing do? This is your good fortune. It's done. The merit is boundless. If it doesn't work, it's nothing. Just go back and cultivate hard and wait for the future. Xianqing already had enough merit on him. The merit from setting up the array disk was not of much use to him. He might as well give it to Duobao as compensation. Then, junior marshal brother will accept your offer. Seeing that Xianqing's attitude was firm, Duobao did not refuse. There was no need to be polite. He just had to remember this matter in his heart. There would be a day when he would repay him in the future. All right, there's no need to be so serious. It's not a big deal. Waving his hand, Xianqing smiled and comforted him. However, his expression changed, and he said seriously, however, it's better to hurry up and refine the array disk. Let's try to refine it as soon as possible. There are countless wise people in the primordial world. If I can think of something, it doesn't mean that they can't. If it's too late and someone else proposes it first, you can't blame others. You can only blame yourself for being incompetent. Wise people could obtain enlightenment from such a major matter that followed the trend of the times. Whoever created the array disk first and created it more perfectly, this merit belonged to the person who obtained it. What Xianqing could do was to tell Duobao about this matter in advance. As for whether or not Duobao could refine the disk array to perfect the array Dao in this period of time, that would depend on his own ability. Whether it succeeded or not, Xianqing wouldn't care. The opportunity had already been given to Duobao. If he couldn't grasp it, then he couldn't blame Xianqing. He could only blame himself for being incompetent. Senior brother, don't worry. Duobao will definitely do his best and be the first to refine the array disk. I will not let the reputation of Jie School's array Dao be ruined in my hands. Duobao was still very confident in himself. It's good that you know what you're doing. That's right, when refining the disk array, you can experiment with the teleportation array. This array was created by you, so it will be much easier to improve it. After thinking about it, Xianqing suggested to Duobao. Yes, senior brother, I know. Duobao nodded to show that he understood. That's it then. Senior brother, do you have anything else to do? I won't accompany you here. With that, Xianqing waved his hand and turned to walk towards the quiet room. Now, Xianqing also had a lot of things to do. The plan to stimulate the consumption of the living beings in the East Sea still needed to be perfected. In the quiet room, a ball of immortal fire that was surrounded by clear light appeared. The Dao runes lingered, and it was extremely terrifying. It set off waves of heat, causing the void to distort. This was the 9 heavens immortal fire, a supreme true fire that was born in the origin of the heaven realm. Its power was boundless, and it was ranked among the top 10 true fires of the primordial world. The essence soul was light and agile, close to the sky. The body was turbid, close to the ground. Therefore, the 9 heavens immortal fire that was born in the origin of the heaven realm contained the connate clear spirit Tao. It specialized in burning the essence soul of people. It was extremely ruthless. Xianqing was from the same sect as the heavens. He basically had all the abilities of the heaven realm. Therefore, the 9 heavens immortal fire was his innate divine ability. He could control it as if it was instinct. Great Tao Furnace, appear. With a command, the great Tao Furnace appeared. It rumbled and floated above the 9 heavens immortal fire. Then, Xianqing formed a Tao seal and controlled the 9 heavens immortal fire. At the same time, he took out several connate spiritual materials and placed them into the great Tao furnace. Yes, that's right. Xianqing was refining artifacts. He planned to take advantage of this period of time to refine some postnatal spiritual treasures and postnatal supreme treasures. As for what to refine, he had an idea. He planned to imitate connate spiritual treasures. In the early years, before the 3 pure ones established their sects, their connate spiritual treasures had been left in the treasury to collect dust. At that time, Xianqing liked to run to the treasury whenever he had nothing to do. As a result, the connate spiritual treasures in the hands of the disciples of the 3 sects were all in Xianqing's hands. Therefore, he knew the functions of the Tao inscriptions contained in the connate spiritual treasures. With these accumulations, it would not be difficult for Xianqing to imitate these connate spiritual treasures. The difficult part was how to make these imitated connate spiritual treasures have the power of the original ones. Fortunately, Xianqing was not imitating connate spiritual treasures to pursue power, but to verify his Tao of refining artifacts. It was not too troublesome. In the blink of an eye, thousands of years had passed. The immortal gathering bell rang again, disturbing the peace of the East Sea and also waking Xianqing up from refining artifacts. Has it been 1,000 years? After returning to his senses, Xianqing stretched, but did not plan to go to Golden Ao Island. Now the Jie sect was on the right track. It did not matter if he, the eldest senior brother, returned or not. It took nearly 1,000 years to refine 9 connate spiritual treasures and 3 connate cardinal treasures. Not bad. In the future, Yun Zhongzi of the Chan sect was famous for imitating connate spiritual treasures. I think he is inferior to me. Looking at the spiritual treasures he had refined, Xianqing said proudly. The 3 connate cardinal treasures were made by Xianqing based on the connate cardinal treasures in the hands of the 3 pure ones. They were the connate Taiji diagram, the connate Panga banner, and the celestial slaying sword formation. The 9 connate spiritual treasures were made by Xianqing based on 9 powerful supreme grade connate spiritual treasures. They were the 8 view palace lantern, the 3 treasures jade rui, the purple lightning hammer, the floating flame flag, the Wuji apricot yellow flag. These 12 spiritual treasures floated in midair, surrounded by Tao runes. They were shining with spiritual light and releasing wisps of divine radiance. They looked extraordinary and almost looked real. Of course, it was only in terms of appearance. These imitated spiritual treasures were naturally far inferior to the original in terms of power. They could only be considered average and were worthy of his grade. This power is indeed a little weak. After a while, the novelty gradually faded. When Xianqing looked at these spiritual treasures again, he could not help but feel a little disdainful. He felt that their power was too weak. As imitations of connate spiritual treasures, they should be one of the best among those of the same grade, even if they were not of a higher grade. Chapter 311. How could it be like now? Its power could only be considered ordinary. Other than its appearance being similar to a connate numinous treasure, there was nothing else special about it. It really disappointed Xianqing. It also let down the connate spiritual materials that he had paid. One had to know that if Xianqing used the materials that he had used to refine these numinous treasures to refine other numinous treasures, the power of the resulting numinous treasures would at least double. In that case, Xianqing would suffer a huge loss. It shouldn't be. With my strength, even if I didn't put in much effort, I shouldn't have refined such a weak, numinous treasure. Moreover, I put in effort. There must be a problem. There must be a problem that I didn't notice. Xianqing was a refiner. He had used many precious connate spiritual materials to refine the numinous treasure. No matter what, it should be one of the best among the same grade. In this situation, something must have happened that he did not know about. Then, Xianqing calmed down and began to deduce silently. Yin-yang Tao patterns appeared and turned into a yin-yang taiji diagram that surrounded his body and rotated endlessly. Under the contrast of the yin-yang taiji diagram, Xianqing's aura changed drastically. He became more and more ethereal and unfathomable. He was as cold as the heavenly Tao and was infinitely close to the Tao. Tao deduction technique. The Tao derived yin and yang to form heaven and earth. That was the deduction technique recorded in the grand pure Tao scripture. Combining the Tao of yin and yang, one could observe heaven and earth, explore the principles of the universe, and observe the universe. All secrets could not be hidden. Fuxi was the peak of the Tao of deduction, and the grand pure one was not bad either. It was not that he did not do anything, but that he did nothing. Throughout the history of the primordial world, although the grand pure one rarely made a move, most of the benefits of the primordial world were in his hands. In silence, he seized everything and became the biggest winner. It had to be said that this was a true algorithm master. Those who were good at fighting had no outstanding achievements. It was probably referring to people like the Grand Pure One. Then, as the deduction technique passed down by the Grand Pure One, the power of the Tao deduction technique could be imagined. Connate Tao luck? After a while, Xianqing retracted his spiritual will and looked enlightened. Connate numinous treasures were treasures born naturally in heaven and earth. At the same time, they were one of the manifestations of the connate myriad Tao in the world. Connate numinous treasures and zenith heaven golden immortals could be called Tao appearances. They were the images of Tao in the world. Therefore, they naturally occupied a wisp of connate luck. As long as the great Tao was not destroyed, the innate Tao luck would not be lost. This wisp of connate Tao providence could be said to be the foundation of the connate numinous treasure and Daoyuo Jingxian. Wasn't Xianqing making the imitations of the primordial spiritual treasures to divide their primordial Tao luck? No matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to tolerate this. Although innate spiritual treasures did not have spiritual intelligence, they were not easily bullied by Xianqing. Behind them, the will of heaven and earth was in charge. Therefore, under the suppression of the rules of heaven and earth, the power of the innate spiritual treasure imitation refined by Xianqing was greatly reduced, far beyond his expectations. Master, please show your power. After thinking for a while, Xianqing raised the replica of the immortal slaying sword formation and suddenly bowed towards the void. As Xianqing's voice fell, sect leader Tong Tian, who was comprehending the great Tao in green Turing Palace, suddenly raised his eyebrows. He could not help but open his eyes and look towards Penglai Island. What kind of cultivation base did the Grand Master of Heaven have? How could the matter on Penglai Island be hidden from him? In just an instant, he understood the cause and effect. You have a lot of ideas. Sensing Xianqing's plan, the Grand Master of Heaven shook his head and laughed. Immediately, he suddenly pointed at the immortal slaying sword formation beside him. Go! Buzz! 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 The immortal slaying sword formation vibrated for a moment and suddenly activated a blood-red sword light. It was extremely sharp and cut through the endless void. It came to Penglai Island and in front of Xianqing. Thank you, Master. Seeing the sword light, Xianqing's face was filled with joy. He quickly bowed towards the void. Then Xianqing performed a spell and guided the immortal slaying sword light into the immortal slaying painting in his hand. Boom! As the sword light entered the body, the immortal slaying painting suddenly changed. The dazzling sword light exploded, and boundless murderous intent surged, reflecting Penglai Island into a blood-red color. Rise! Xianqing stretched out his finger, and the Dharma power in his body surged out and poured into the immortal slaying painting, fully activating its power. Innate Tao patterns appeared, densely packed, and formed four blood-red long swords around the surroundings, covering the void in all directions and isolating the past from the future. On the swords, blood-red murderous intent flowed, emitting a terrifying power. The four swords appeared at the same time, destroying all life and cutting off all future, creating a situation where there was no chance of survival. This was the immortal slaying sword formation, the projection of the real immortal slaying sword formation. Xianqing used the pirated immortal slaying sword formation as a basis to communicate with the real immortal slaying sword formation and borrow its power. In the void, it formed the projection of the immortal slaying sword formation. This formation was extremely powerful and contained endless murderous intent, as if it could destroy the world. Although it was far from the real immortal slaying sword formation, it was not inferior to an ordinary supreme-grade innate spiritual treasure. The method is good, but it's a pity. Looking at the immortal slaying sword formation in the sky, Xianqing suddenly sighed and slowly dispersed the formation. Then, something surprising happened. A gust of wind blew past, and Xianqing's imitation of the immortal slaying sword formation suddenly turned into ashes and scattered between heaven and earth. The immortal slaying sword formation was an innate spiritual treasure, and its power was definitely beyond imagination. How could a small acquired spiritual treasure withstand its power? Previously, it was still supported by the power of the immortal slaying sword formation and could barely maintain its form. But after the power of the immortal slaying sword formation faded, the acquired spiritual treasure naturally could not maintain its form and collapsed. TSK. A one-time Dharma treasure. An explosive weapon. I seem to have accidentally refined something amazing. At this moment, Xianqing sighed with melancholy. It was an instant of brilliance and extreme brilliance. At the cost of exhausting itself, it could erupt with power that was comparable to a supreme-grade innate spiritual treasure. Although it was only a chance to strike, it was enough to attract attention. If the acquired spiritual treasure refined by Xianqing could borrow the power of a corresponding innate spiritual treasure, it would become a spiritual treasure that was explosive. Similarly, if the acquired spiritual treasure could borrow the power of a supreme-grade innate spiritual treasure, it could also erupt with power that was comparable to an innate spiritual treasure. It was just that the price was a little high. The materials used to refine these spiritual treasures were not cabbages that could be found on the roadside. They were all spiritual materials that were nurtured by heaven and earth, and each of them was precious. Xianqing did not care about the consumption of one or two of them, but he could not bear the consumption of dozens or hundreds of them. Sigh, this spiritual treasure is really useless. Not to mention the consumption of spiritual materials. Just borrowing the power of the innate spiritual treasure was a little helpless. Innate spiritual treasures had owners. If he wanted to borrow their power, he had to first get the consent of their owners. It was fine to borrow power once or twice, but if it happened too many times, no matter how good their relationship was, he would gradually get tired of it. Chapter 312. Without a connate cardinal treasure in hand, this kind of refining technique was completely meaningless. No, it was not completely meaningless. At the very least, it gave Xianqing a lot of inspiration. A disposable numinous treasure was very promising. This was completely the prototype of a talisman. It was just that it was in the shape of a numinous treasure. Although the price to pay was a little high, its power was also very extraordinary. What Xianqing had to do now was to try his best to unleash the strongest power at the lowest price and let the disposable Dharma treasure really spread in the primordial world. As for imitating a connate numinous treasure, forget it. The gains did not make up for the losses. It was better to focus on researching disposable Dharma treasures. Xianqing still had the ability to act as soon as he thought of it. In his sea of consciousness, his essence soul trembled and contacted Hongmeng Daozhong on the Ziwei star. Boundless Dao runes crossed layers of space and descended here, causing Xianqing to fall into the deepest state of Dao enlightenment. For a moment, Xianqing's comprehension increased greatly. Countless ideas flashed in his mind, and all kinds of insights surfaced in his mind, allowing him to have a clearer understanding of disposable Dharma treasures. He also had many more ideas to improve it. Just like that, Xianqing was immersed in improving the disposable Dharma treasures. Time passed just like that without anyone noticing. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed. Boom! On this day, black and yellow merit suddenly fell from the sky, causing a boundless phenomenon and waking Xianqing up from his Dao enlightenment. That place, its duobao, looks like the array disk has been completed. Looking in the direction of the commotion that attracted merit was where duobao was. There was no need to think too much. The array disk must have been completed. Otherwise, the heavenly Dao would not have given so much merit. Just as Xianqing was thinking, the merit in the sky moved. It was like a golden waterfall, mighty and majestic. If not for the fact that the three immortal island was protected by the connate array, it would have attracted the attention of many powerful beings. When the merit fell, 20% of it landed on Xianqing's head to reward him for teaching duobao. The remaining 80% of the merit landed on duobao. He put it away and stored it in his sea of consciousness to protect the clarity of his spirit platform. Looking at the time, it's not far from the day of Master's lecture. I should start the next stage of the plan. Looking at the newly refined Dharma treasures in front of him, Xianqing smiled. He waved his hand and put them away. Then he walked towards duobao. The amount of spiritual materials required to refine this magic treasure was 90% less than the previous one. Of course, due to the lack of materials, the prowess of the artifact had also been reduced correspondingly. However, it was not a big problem. There was nothing perfect in the world. Xianqing was already very satisfied to be able to achieve this step. After Xianqing's modification, the power of these acquired spirit treasures had undergone earth-shaking changes. When an inferior acquired spirit treasure erupted with its full power, it was equivalent to the full power strike of an early Daluo Jinxian expert. The full power of a middle-grade acquired spirit treasure was equivalent to the full power strike of a mid-stage Daluo Jinxian expert, and so on. Activating the acquired spiritual treasure with all his strength was equivalent to Daluo Jinxian attacking. Of course, these acquired spiritual treasures only had one chance to strike. After that, they would vanish into thin air. Otherwise, the power of these acquired spiritual treasures would be too strong. They would be even stronger than innate spirit treasures. This was unrealistic. As for the acquired supreme treasures, perhaps because Xianqing had not broken through to the sage-to-be, no matter how hard he tried, he could not raise the power of the acquired supreme treasures to the sage-to-be level. He could only reach the level of a half-step sage-to-be. However, this did not matter. If he really reached the sage-to-be level, the acquired supreme treasures would be useless. Without a doubt, the acquired supreme treasures at the sage-to-be level were used to deal with Daluo Jinxian and the sage-to-be. But facing them, the strong naturally had no fear. But the weak did not even have the chance to make a move. In the face of absolute strength, the weak could not even take out their weapons. Senior brother, look. Seeing Xianqing, duobao ran to his side excitedly and handed the silver array disc in his hand to him as if he was presenting a treasure. This was a space array disc. the first array disk in the primordial world. Duo Bao spent thousands of years and countless spiritual materials to finally refine it. This array disk was originally an acquired supreme treasure. Later, with the blessing of merit, it had been promoted to an acquired supreme treasure of merit. Its function was similar to the space array diagram, but it was more convenient and simple. But at the same time, there were gains and losses. In terms of power, the array disk was undoubtedly much smaller than the array diagram. It was about 10 times more. Very good. You didn't disappoint me. Duo Bao, can you do me another favor? Xianqing first nodded to express his appreciation for Duo Bao. Then he suddenly changed the topic and said to him, "Yes, what other orders do you have, senior brother? Please tell me. Duo Bao will do his best to complete it." Now, no matter what Xianqing asked Duo Bao to do, he would probably not refuse. "It's not a big deal. I urgently need a batch of space array disks now. So, I'll have to trouble you to help me make a batch of space array disks here. Before Master's sermon begins, make as many as you can. I need them urgently." These space array disks were related to Xianqing's next plan. Therefore, he had to continue to catch Duo Bao as a strong man. Again. Hearing this, Duo Bao's face could not help but turn bitter. All these years, he didn't know how many spatial array disks he had refined, to the point that he wanted to vomit. If it weren't for the fact that he had merit to support him, he would have quit long ago. Now he had finally been freed. Before he could rest, he was caught by Xianqing again. His bitter expression was already good enough. Of course, even so, Duo Bao did not refuse. He forced himself to focus, grabbed the materials, and continued to refine the disk array. Duo Bao, you're using this to refine weapons. Master has so many primordial cauldrons. Why don't you ask for one? After a while, Xianqing suddenly realized that something was amiss. The Tao cauldron that Duo Bao used to refine treasures was actually only at the postnatal cardinal level. This was too inconceivable. That's many treasures. Many treasures, many treasures, many riches, many treasures. One was born with fate with connate numinous treasures. How could he not have a Xiantian cauldron? After all, the true body of many treasures was the treasure-snatching rock outside the Purple Cloud Palace. The treasure-snatching rock that held countless connate numinous treasures. It could be said that more than half of the connate numinous treasures in the entire primordial world had been placed on the treasure-snatching rock. Countless years ago, when many great masters were still young, they had used various methods to collect connate numinous treasures on the treasure-snatching rock. That was why many great masters did not lack connate numinous treasures. Otherwise, with the exception of a small number of innate saints, the rest of the great mediums should be poor. They would only have their connate numinous treasures with them. Other than that, there was nothing else. Chapter 3:13. After obtaining the innate spiritual treasures from the treasure-snatching rock, those great mediums directly left the chaos beyond the heavens. Only Tongtian sect leader thought of the treasure-snatching rock's extraordinariness and took it away before leaving. As for those great mediums who had yet to leave, when they saw the scene, they could not help but feel regret and secretly scold themselves for being stupid. The treasure was right in front of them, but they did not realize it. They deserved to be inferior to others. Think about it. How could the treasure-snatching rock be used by a Tao ancestor to store innate spiritual treasures? An ordinary innate stubborn rock was undoubtedly a supreme treasure. It was a pity that they were so stupid that Taoist Shangqing obtained this fortune. Thinking about it made their hearts ache. However, Taoist Shangqing obtained the treasure-snatching rock and wanted to refine it into a spiritual treasure. Unfortunately, the treasure-snatching rock left the chaos beyond the heavens and was infected by the primitive spiritual qi, giving birth to a trace of spiritual intelligence. As such, Taoist Shangqing could not bear to do it and placed the treasure-snatching rock in Mount Kunlun, allowing it to seize the fortune of the heavens and earth and invade the spiritual opportunity of the sun and moon, waiting for the day when it could transform. This was the origin of many treasures. Those innate spiritual treasures had stayed on many treasures for an unknown period of time and had long left indelible marks. And these marks were fate. It was the indelible fate that those innate spiritual treasures had with many treasures. Back then, the number of innate spiritual treasures on the treasure-snatching rock was simply innumerable. Even though some of them were taken away by those great mediums, there were still many left. They were scattered into the wilderness by the Tao ancestor and left for the fated person. Many treasures was the fated person. If the innate spiritual treasures lying on the treasure-snatching rock in the past did not meet their destined owner, when they saw many treasures and sensed that familiar aura, they would automatically fly into his hands. Therefore, no matter where many treasures went, there would be innate spiritual treasures throwing themselves into his arms. This was the fate of the past, and outsiders could not be envious. For such a person, it would be unreasonable if he did not have a cauldron of innate spiritual treasures. Senior Marshall brother, there were no cauldrons of innate spiritual treasures on the treasure-snatching rock in the past. Therefore, I am not fated with them and cannot take them easily. Many treasures replied with a bitter smile, as if he had thought of something bad. The more powerful one was, the more one needed to be restricted. Duobao's fortune was so heaven-defying that it naturally had all kinds of drawbacks. Duobao could take any primordial spiritual treasure that was not on the treasure-snatching rock, but he could never refine it. Otherwise, it would definitely damage one's luck and cause a calamity to befall them. Perhaps in the future, Duobao had probably taken a connate numinous treasure that he should not have taken. That was why he had caused the calamity to befall him. As a result, he was involved in the God-confirming tribulation and was suppressed by the Grand Pure One. Otherwise, how could myriad treasures, who had the providence of so many connate numinous treasures, encounter a tribulation? Being free and unfettered was the treatment he deserved. It was also later on that myriad treasures scattered all his connate spiritual treasures, and his providence returned to its peak. This allowed his cultivation to soar all the way, and he became a top-notch great medium, shaking the 3 realms and 6 Tao with his might. There were gains and losses, and that was it. You're still complaining? Do you know how many people in the primordial world envy your luck? Seriously, seeing Duobao's look of disdain, Xianqing pointed at him and was speechless. Almost half of the connate spiritual treasures in the primordial world were fated with him, but he was still complaining. A full man did not know the hunger of a hungry man. If outsiders were to find out about this, who knew how jealous they would be? Senior brother, you don't understand. The feeling of not being able to refine a connate spiritual treasure when it is right in front of you is tormenting. It's simply heart-wrenching. Shaking his head, Duobao's expression was a little melancholic, as if they did not understand. Due to his nature, Duobao had an extraordinary love for connate spiritual treasures. When he saw them, he wanted to take them for himself. However, there were some connate spiritual treasures that he could not refine. This made him, who loved treasures very much, feel very uncomfortable. Haha! Xianqing could only sneer at Duobao's pretentiousness. Why didn't he feel troubled when the connate spiritual treasure threw itself at him? Now he was complaining. He was still too greedy. However, Xianqing did not say anything. That was Duobao's nature. He could only change it himself. Outsiders could not interfere. The path of the great Tao was long. If he wanted to walk for a long time, he had to abide by his heart and be firm in his beliefs. However, it was not a good thing to suppress one's nature. It would breed external demons and affect one's Tao heart. The balance between the two could only be grasped by oneself. Outsiders really could not help. You're using this postnatal cardinal treasure to refine artifacts. How about this? I'll teach you a mystical ability. In the future, even if you use this technique to refine pills and artifacts, it will be much better than using postnatal cardinal treasures. This was the era of the Khanate. Wasn't it a joke to use postnatal cardinal treasures in this era? Was it worthy of refining a postnatal cardinal treasure into a Khanate spiritual object? Moreover, how could a postnatal cardinal treasure be compared to a Khanate spiritual treasure? The difference in essence would definitely lead to a huge difference in the things they refined. Based on this thought, Xianqing could not stand it anymore. He wanted to impart a supreme mystical ability to Duobao so that he could escape the embarrassment of using a postnatal cardinal treasure. As for a cauldron-type Khanate spiritual treasure, Xianqing did not dare to give it. If it ruined Duobao's Khanate Dao luck because of this, it would be a huge sin. When the day came when Duobao could possess a Khanate spiritual treasure as he wished, it would mean that he had reached perfection and achieved Dao. That would be the primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian. Comprehend it well. Xianqing pointed at Duobao and imparted everything about the heaven and earth furnace to him. The heaven and earth furnace used heaven and earth as the furnace, yin and yang as the coal, and creation as the fire to refine everything in the world. Whether it was refining artifacts, refining pills, or fighting enemies, it was very useful. It could be said to be omnipotent. At first, this mystical ability was the most ordinary mystical ability. However, after Feng Ziqin verified it with heaven and earth many times, it had already undergone a transformation and sublimated into a supreme mystical ability. Senior brother is so talented. After digesting the information in his sea of consciousness, Duobao's face was full of admiration. Abandoning all external objects and borrowing the power of heaven and earth to form a spiritual treasure. Its power was not inferior to a Khanate spiritual treasure. This technique was called using Dao to develop artifacts. It was the highest achievement in the path of refining artifacts. In the primordial world, there were very few people who could do this. They were all great figures who shocked the primordial world. For Xianqing to be able to do this, one could imagine how powerful his methods were. I didn't create this mystical ability. It was created by my good friend, the Ziqin clan. Therefore, without his permission, you must not spread this mystical ability. Ignoring Duobao's flattery, Xianqing said with a serious face. He believed that it would not be long before his two bodies, Xianqing and Feng Ziqin, would meet in the East Sea. Now he had to make some preparations in advance to avoid trouble in the future. Chapter 3:14. Today he would inform Duobao about this matter. Tomorrow he would inform the disciples of Jie School. Before long, the news that Xianqing and Feng Ziqin were best friends would spread throughout the East Ocean. At that time, the exchange of numinous treasures between the two of them would not seem so abrupt. The sea-calming divine pearl had to be given to Feng Ziqin to increase the grade of the chaos bead. As for the one origin Dao talisman, it had to be given to Xianqing to help him establish the Dao of talismans. In this way, it was very important to publicize the relationship between the two of them in advance. After all, it was normal for good friends to exchange numinous treasures in the primordial world. Ziqin clan. Primordial sword ancestor. Senior brother is actually good friends with the sword ancestor. This is really unexpected. Feng Ziqin's name was known by everyone in the primordial world. Duobao naturally knew about it. He created something out of nothing and opened up a Khanate Dao. It was difficult not to know such a person. His home is on the edge of the East Ocean. What's so strange about him being familiar with me? Shaking his head, Xianqing said indifferently. This was deliberately done by him. The more carefree he appeared, the more it reflected the close relationship between the two of them. Don't worry, senior brother. Without the sword ancestor's permission, I will never teach this divine ability to others. Duo Bao hurriedly promised. I'm not worried about you. Nodding, Xianqing urged. All right, I've already taught you the divine ability. It's time for you to get down to business. Hurry up and help me refine the teleportation array disk. The more, the better. Senior brother, the gap here is a little big. Without waiting for Duo Bao to reply, Xianqing waved his hand and took out the void stone. Then he used the heaven and earth furnace to refine the teleportation array disk. The teleportation array disk was of great use to him. When Duo Bao saw this, he did not dare to hesitate. He quickly used the heaven and earth furnace that he had just learned and began to refine the teleportation array disk. After all, he was a top-notch Khanate god fiend. His comprehension was extremely high. Even a supreme divine ability like the heaven and earth furnace could be learned in an instant. It's about time. It's time to go to Golden Turtle Island. At a certain moment, Xianqing sensed something. He pinched his fingers and calculated the time. He realized that there were still 100 years before the Grandmaster of Heaven's next lecture. Duo Bao, I have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. After 60 years, take the teleportation formation disk that you refined and look for me outside Golden Turtle Island. Xianqing turned his head and said to Duo Bao. Then he put away the teleportation formation disk that the two of them had refined over the years and rushed to Golden Turtle Island. Before Duo Bao could reply, Xianqing's figure disappeared. It could be seen that he left in a hurry. Daluo Jingxian drifted outside of time and space. Distance had long lost its meaning to them. To them, as long as time and space were not sealed, they could cross thousands of rivers and mountains and go back and forth between the past and the future with a single thought. In the blink of an eye, they traveled hundreds of millions of miles. To Xianqing, the distance between Penglai Island and Golden Turtle Island was only a step away. Therefore, as soon as Xianqing finished speaking, he had already arrived near Golden Turtle Island. However, after Xianqing arrived, he did not directly enter the island. Instead, he wandered around Golden Turtle Island. At this moment, there was still 100 years before the Grandmaster of Heaven's sermon. However, the primordial creatures that had come because of its reputation had already filled the nearby sea. Xianqing looked over and saw that all he could see were the primordial creatures. They were densely packed and could not be seen at a glance. It was a vast expanse of darkness. If this was not the saints' Taoist field, Xianqing believed that the people here would have already started fighting. It would definitely not be such a quiet, peaceful, and harmonious scene. However, it did not matter. What he wanted was to have more people. This place was just what he wanted. It was also very suitable for the next step of his plan. This is it. After wandering around the nearby sea for a while, Xianqing's eyes lit up. He found a place that he was satisfied with and immediately stopped there. Then he gently tapped his right foot. Auspicious clouds suddenly appeared on the surface of the sea and spread out evenly. They were about 10 feet in radius. Then Xianqing's hand shook. The teleportation formation disk that he had refined earlier automatically appeared on the auspicious clouds and was placed side by side. It was like a small stall. That's right. Xianqing's plan was to set up a stall here to sell the teleportation formation disk while there were many people here. Of course, selling the teleportation formation disk was just a side benefit. His real goal was to promote the circulation of the Khanate creation pill. Humans had a herd mentality. As long as he set up a stall here and earned the Khanate creation pill, there was no need to think too much. There would definitely be people who would follow suit and set up a stall here in order to earn the Khanate creation pill. Humans were all profit-seeking. It was hard for people not to be tempted when they saw the benefits. Of course, in the primordial world, there was no lack of people who were dedicated to pursuing the Tao. However, those who pursued the Tao also needed to cultivate. The reason why the Khanate creation pill could become a currency was that it had extraordinary value in itself. It could help people cultivate. No one could refuse it. Therefore, Xianqing's plan to set up a stall was very promising. In this way, the circulation of the Khanate creation pill would definitely be greatly accelerated. Thus, Xianqing would obtain the luck of the primordial world currency. This was his real goal. Setting up a stall was just a method. If the effect was obvious, he would open a shop or even a chamber of commerce. Xianqing was willing to try any method that could make the Khanate creation pill circulate. Even if he had to become the biggest profiteer in the East Sea, he would not hesitate. As for setting up a stall alone, would it have such a great influence? Xianqing expressed that there was no problem at all. The Jie school did not have many things, but they had many disciples. As long as the stall was effective, believe it or not, all the disciples of the Jie school would take out the treasures that they did not need and sell them in the East Sea to stimulate the circulation of the Khanate creation pill. He believed that the next time the living beings of the primordial world came to listen to the Grand Master of Heaven's sermon, they would find that the vicinity of Golden Ao Island was filled with stalls. The treasures sold by the stalls would also make them willingly take out the Khanate creation pill. With this thought in mind, Xianqing took out a wooden sign and wrote down the function of the teleportation array disc in detail. He also marked the price and sold it publicly. The teleportation array disc is within hundreds of millions of miles. As long as you put in the spatial coordinates, you can reach it in an instant. Price: 100 yin-yang creation pills. And Xianqing's strange actions naturally attracted the attention of many people. Teleportation array disc, what's that? Why have I never heard of it? Within hundreds of millions of miles, you can reach it in an instant. There's actually such a treasure in the world. Doesn't that mean that even if we don't have the cultivation of Tai Jingxian, we can still use this treasure to travel through the void? Seeing the introduction of the teleportation array disc, everyone was puzzled at first. Then they gradually understood. In the end, everyone completely understood the function of the teleportation array disc. Chapter 315. This teleportation array. It was really used for escaping. Ba. A supreme treasure that could be used to hasten one's journey. With it, he would not have to fly slowly on his own in the future. As long as he activated the teleportation array disc, he would arrive at his destination with a whoosh. It was really too convenient. At the same time, with the teleportation array disc, he would be much more relaxed when fighting with others. If he really could not win, he could use the teleportation array disc to leave. He would not be in such a sorry state like before, or even lose his life. This treasure, called the teleportation array disc, was very useful. Looking at the teleportation array disc for a moment, everyone's breathing could not help but become heavy. Their eyes were also filled with desire. Obviously, they were excited. Looking at their eager eyes and listening to their heavy breathing, if Xianqing did not have Daluo Jinxian's cultivation, he would really be afraid that they would pounce on him and snatch him away. No one doubted that the teleportation array disc's function would be fake, because on Xianqing's body, the vast and profound aura that was like the great Tao was all showing his cultivation. Daluo Jinxian. No matter how useless a Daluo Jinxian was, he would not come out to deceive them, Tai Jingxian and Golden Immortals, because he really could not afford to lose that person. To be able to deceive cultivators of the same level was called ability. To deceive cultivators with higher cultivation than oneself was courting death. And Daluo Jinxian deceived cultivators who had not attained the Tao. If word got out, he would definitely become the laughingstock of the primordial world. He would not be able to live anymore. Therefore, when everyone confirmed the Xianqing realm, they also confirmed the ability of the teleportation array disc. Taoist priests, how do I use this teleportation array disc? After a while, a person mustered up his courage and walked forward to ask Xianqing. This person's body was similar to a goat. He was obviously a creature from the primordial world. From this, it could be seen how difficult it was for him to come to the East Sea. If he had the teleportation array disc, then it would not be as troublesome for him to come to the East Sea Golden Ao Island in the future. This item was especially important to him. Therefore, he could not help but muster up his courage and be the first to ask Xianqing. Since the Taoist priests had already publicly sold transmission array discs, then his question shouldn't be too abrupt, right? Looking at Xianqing in front of him, that person felt uneasy. This was the first time he had come into such close contact with Daluo Jingxian. Nervousness was unavoidable. With a single 5 elements creation pill, it can teleport you 1,000,000 kilometers away. With a single yin-yang nature pill, it can teleport millions of miles. So on and so forth. The more innate pills of fortune there are, the further the teleportation distance. Xianqing said leisurely as he glanced at the person who had just arrived. This person definitely did not have a great background. Otherwise, he would not have come all the way to the East Sea's Golden Turtle Island to listen to Tongqian's preaching. One had to know that the Grand Master of Heaven was not the only one who would preach the Tao every 1,000 years. The 2 saints from Kunlun Mountains, Jade Void Palace, and Shoyang Mountains Buying Palace were also preaching the Tao. All living beings in the primordial world could listen to them. However, one of the 2 saints did not accept disciples, and the other did not like demons. It was impossible for everyone to try their luck there. It was better to come to the Grand Master of Heaven. If they were lucky enough, he might take a fancy to them and accept them as disciples. Even if they were just in-name disciples, everything would be different. Their fates would be completely changed, and they would have the possibility to aspire to the great Tao. Therefore, although the 3 pure ones were preaching the Tao, the number of people who came to listen to the Grand Master of Heaven was obviously higher than the other 2 saints. In fact, the number of people who came to listen to the Tao from the other 2 saints was not as many as the number of people who came to listen to the Grand Master of Heaven. In the primordial world, the most popular and famous saint was none other than the Grand Master of Heaven. After all, he was the only one in the primordial world who said that there was no discrimination in education and took action for it. I want one of those Taoist priests. Gritting his teeth, that person took out 100 yin-yang nature pills and handed them to Xianqing. Looking at him, one could tell that if he took out 100 yin-yang nature pills, he would probably lose half of his wealth. However, Xianqing did not give him a discount because of this. As the first person to use the connate nature pills to trade, if the connate nature pills became popular in the primordial world, he would naturally get a share of the luck. Although he did not know it himself, this was already a great blessing. He did not need Xianqing to give him anything else. Do you think it's expensive? After accepting the yin-yang nature pills, Xianqing picked up a teleportation array disc and personally handed it to him. No, it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. That person took the teleportation array disc with a face full of fear and said repeatedly, Daluo Jingxian personally handed over the item. He had never enjoyed such treatment before. After today, he would have the confidence to brag to others. This was capital. Don't be nervous. What's your name? Xianqing smiled and asked. Greetings, celestial supremacy of the 9 heavens. Blessed with good fortune, Mo Yan understood Xianqing's identity and bowed to him. Greetings, celestial supremacy of the 9 heavens. Praise the celestial supremacy of the 9 heavens, the sect of alchemy, the king of heaven, the virtuous spiritual emperor, Wuji immeasurable. At the same time, everyone bowed to Xianqing and praised him. The celestial supremacy of the 9 heavens represented the Taoist priests of the celestial sect of wonders. The sect of alchemy represented the ancestor of qi pills. The king of heaven represented the same sect as heaven. The virtuous spiritual emperor represented the emperor of the spirit clan. Wuji immeasurable represented extreme nobility and brilliance. It was everyone's blessing to Xianqing, wishing him to become primordial chaos as soon as possible. Get up. Xianqing looked at the people in front of him and said lightly. Immediately, a gentle force appeared. It was invisible and intangible and lifted everyone up. Thank you, celestial supremacy. After getting up, everyone thanked Xianqing. Poor Wei is Xianqing, a disciple of the celestial sect of wonders. I'm sure all of you have heard of the name of Poor Wei. Xianqing smiled and introduced himself. The Tao of the Celestial Supremacy's Qi Establishment Pill was developed, and the Connate Creation Pill was developed to benefit all living beings in the primitive world. It is really a boundless merit. We have all received the kindness of the Celestial Supremacy. Naturally, we know the name of the Celestial Supremacy. Anyone who had used the Connate Creation Pill to cultivate was considered to have received the favor of Xianqing and owed him a favor. That was why everyone bowed to Xianqing. Otherwise, why would they bow to Xianqing? Did they really think that the living beings of the primitive world were so lowly that they would bow to Daluo Jinxian when they saw him? That was impossible. Under the influence of Pango, the pride of the living beings of the primitive world was innate. If it was not someone they recognized, even if they were killed, they would not bow their heads. This kind of innate arrogance and unyielding spirit was something that the later generations could not compare to. It could only be said that the hearts of the later generations were bad. They became more selfish and more profit-driven, gradually deviating from the heart of seeking Tao. This was also the reason why the cultivators of the later generations could not compare to the cultivators of today. Chapter 3:16. It was not that the current method was inferior to the ancient method. It was not that the cultivation environment was inferior to the past. It was that the human heart had changed and deviated from the Tao. Let's ask, how could one achieve great things if they were different from the Tao? This teleportation array disc is indeed a little expensive. Everyone remained silent, but Xianqing took the initiative to speak. Xianqing was so blunt that everyone present did not know how to respond. Expensive, of course it was expensive. However, the immortal supremacy had personally come to sell it. How could everyone say that it was expensive? Were they still giving the immortal supremacy face? As for the immortal supremacy saying that it was expensive, that was someone else's item. Naturally, they could say whatever they wanted. However, if they continued to speak, it would be troublesome if they angered the immortal supremacy. After all, no one knew what kind of medicine the celestial venerable had up his sleeve. Therefore, silence was the best choice at this moment. This teleportation array disc was created by junior brother Poor Wei, the second disciple of Jie School, Duo Bao Immortal Lord, with painstaking efforts and thousands of years. Ignoring everyone's reaction, Xianqing began to talk about the origin of the teleportation array disc. His original intention of refining this treasure was to benefit all living beings in the primordial world, so that the people of the world would no longer have to travel long distances, and so that they could travel freely in the primordial world and the endless starry sky. Letting the world see the vastness of the world and know the vastness of the universe can be considered his merit. Originally, this treasure should have been provided to everyone for free. However, after thinking about it, we felt that this matter was inappropriate. After all, this array disc contains Duobao's painstaking efforts. If it is given away freely, the people of the world will inevitably look down on it. If this treasure is looked down upon because of this, what will happen to Duobao? Therefore, the Poor Wei set the price of 100 yin-yang creation pills for this teleportation array disc to reflect the preciousness of this treasure. It's also good to let the world know that creation is not easy to come by. They should cherish it. There is no free good thing in this world. In the primordial world, no matter what the initial goal was, the first thing to do was to find a name that was considerate of all living beings in the primordial world and add it to their own head. This way, they would be able to occupy the righteous status and gain the recognition of all living beings in the primordial world. It would undoubtedly be much more convenient to do things. After all, who would dare to stop him from helping all living beings in the primordial world? Did he not want to live anymore? Everyone in the primordial world could drown him with a mouthful of saliva. Also, did he really think that human Tao did not exist? When all the living beings of the great, desolate Aeon unanimously cursed a person, the might of the human Tao would definitely descend. At that time, even a saint would not be able to survive. That was what Xianqing was doing now, regardless of whether his goal was to promote the connate creation pill or not. In any case, the transportation formation disk did indeed bring benefits to the great, desolate Aeon. There was nothing to question about this. Therefore, when Xianqing used this point to talk about things, it seemed very reasonable and righteous. No one could say anything about it, and it was quite infectious. At the very least, he believed it himself. Do you understand? In the end, Xianqing even pretended to ask the silent crowd, "We understand Venerable Immortal's efforts." After Xianqing finished speaking, everyone hurriedly bowed to him excitedly. Their faces were filled with gratitude. It was truly a sight to behold. As for whether or not they were truly moved, that was something that no one knew. However, this was not important. Seeing the gratitude on everyone's faces, Xianqing knew that his goal had been achieved. It did not matter if it was true or not. All right. Poor Wei also knows that the transportation formation disk is a little expensive. 100 yin-yang creation pills is half a lifetime's savings for most Tai Jinxian. Therefore, fellow Taoists who really can't afford the transportation formation disk can get a free refining method of the transportation formation from Poor Wei. The function of this transportation formation is similar to the transportation formation disk, but it's not as convenient. After all, he had to take into account the reputation of the Jia school. Xianqing did not go to the extreme and decided to spread the refining method of the transportation formation disk. Of course, Xianqing would not provide the materials. They would have to collect these materials themselves. As for whether they could set up the transportation formation in the future, that had nothing to do with Xianqing. They could only rely on their own abilities. Thank you for your kindness, Venerable Immortal. Everyone hurriedly thanked him when they heard that. 100 creation pills was too much. If they were to take it out, it would really hurt everyone. Thank you for your kindness, Immortal Lord of Many Treasures. Praise to the Immortal Lord of Many Treasures. There will be no disasters and no tribulations. Your merit is boundless. After that, everyone bowed in the direction of Goldeneo Island to thank Many Treasures for creating the transportation formation disk. Fellow Taoists, there's no need to be so polite. Xianqing waved his hand. He first lifted everyone up and then continued. Fellow Taoists, if you can't set up the transportation formation on your own, you don't have to worry too much. Soon, Poor Wei will lead all of you to set up the transportation formation on the various islands of the East Sea. The entire East Sea will be connected. It will be convenient for the living beings of the East Sea to communicate. Xianqing had long planned for this. Now that the living beings of the East Sea were gathered, he would make it public. If the transportation formation was completed, it would not be too much to collect some creation pills as travel expenses, right? In this way, wouldn't it stimulate the consumption of the living beings of the East Sea? Xianqing's goal of speeding up the circulation of the creation pills could also be achieved, and the living beings of the East Sea could benefit from it. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Xianqing's words completely shocked everyone. They hurriedly bowed and were about to kowtow to Xianqing again. However, just as everyone was about to move, they saw Xianqing waving his hand. A huge force descended and interrupted their movements, preventing them from bowing. I told you not to be so polite, but you're still so. Xianqing smiled helplessly. Celestial Lord's great virtue is really admirable. Celestial Lord! Seeing that they could not continue bowing, everyone praised him. Unfortunately, Xianqing had long been immune to praises. No matter how much everyone praised him, it could not move him. Fellow Taoists, since poor Wei has returned to the East Sea, he has to protect the peace of this place. Poor Wei does not care about the matters of the sea. However, I have to take care of the matters on the surface of the sea. In the future, if there are any more people who commit crimes, don't blame poor Wei's ninth heaven seal for being merciless. After a while, when everyone gradually quieted down, Xianqing suddenly said sternly. At the same time, the ninth heaven seal automatically appeared and surrounded Xianqing, releasing a terrifying power. The void was distorted, and the rules were chaotic. This was a declaration of sovereignty. As a Khanate god-fiend born in the East Sea, Xianqing was the most orthodox ruler of the East Sea. In the past, he was not in the East Sea, so it was fine. But now he had returned from Kunlun Mountain. This East Sea naturally had to follow his rules. Chapter 317. Today, Xianqing wanted to tell everyone in the East Sea and the countless living beings in the untainted land that the ruler of the East Sea had returned. From now on, His Majesty would cover the entire East Sea. The chaotic and disorderly East Sea would become history. Everything in the East Sea would operate according to his will. It had been hundreds of millions of years since the Duke of the East Sea had died. Today, Xianqing officially announced to the untainted land outside Golden Ao Island. He was the ruler of the East Sea. He would become the new ruler of the East Sea after the Duke of the East Sea and command everything in the East Sea. As the only perfected golden immortal among the remaining Khanate god-fiends in the East Sea, Xianqing was qualified to be the ruler of the East Sea. That was because the other Daluo Jinxian had the status, but their realms were too weak. If they rashly took the position, it would be difficult to convince the masses and cause a lot of trouble. Only Xianqing, who had the status and strength, could replace the Duke of the East Sea who had returned to the Great Tao and become the new ruler of the East Sea. Rumble. The moment Xianqing's aura erupted, the wind and clouds in the sky above the East Sea changed. There were rules manifesting, and a vast power descended, suppressing the entire East Sea. Whoosh! Under this huge power, the entire East Sea was churning, setting off monstrous waves. All the islands were trembling, buzzing, and triggering the East Sea spirit veins. Then, in this series of changes, the East Sea underwent an extremely shocking change. A huge land suddenly appeared on the surface of the East Sea. Its figure was looming, surrounded by laws, interweaving into an endless scene, magnificent. It also exuded an ancient aura, as if it was the carrier of Tao with boundless Tao. This was the Ziji state, the head of the male immortals in the world, the Duke of the East Sea. It was also the location of the former third most powerful force in the untainted land, the Purple Mansion. Today, after Xianqing announced that he had officially become the ruler of the East Sea, the Ziji state that had disappeared for a long time suddenly reappeared, setting off endless waves and breaking the peace of the untainted land. All the powerful figures were shocked because of this. They all looked over and stared at the Ziji state with inexplicable expressions. Ziji state, Ziji state, Duke of the East Sea, are you returning? The familiar scene reappeared, bringing with it memories from a long time ago. For a time, scenes that had long been buried in the depths of their memories surfaced in the minds of the great divine ability experts. Like a slideshow, it flashed by quickly. Finally, the image stopped on a handsome man. That person had a three-dimensional crown and was wearing a 9-colored robe. He was the head of the male immortals in the world, Dong Wanggong. Donghua was born from the true qi of Emperor Donghua. It ruled the East Pole and was above Donghua. He was in charge of the Yang Qi, and in the East he was also known as Wanggong. It was Tung Wang Kung, similar to the Queen Mother of the West. It was formed from the pure essence of the great Tao in the Eastern Ming Sea. Together with the Queen Mother of the West, they nurtured the heaven and earth, nurtured all living things. Above the heavens, under the earth, 3 realms and 10 directions, man ascended to immortality and attained the Tao. He was the head of all the male immortals in the world. This was personally conferred by the Tao ancestor, with the dragon-headed cane as proof. Has the East Sea changed masters? No wonder purple prefectures would appear. Cultivator Dong Wanggong has been dead for too long. His influence on the world is getting smaller and smaller. As a result, the authority he had when he was alive is slowly being lost. I really don't know how much of his supreme authority will be left when he returns, and how much of his strength will be left. Tai is really ruthless. He actually plundered Dong Wanggong's innate origin. Sai, what kind of cultivation level did the great beings have? The moment they saw the change in the East Sea, they understood that this was not the revival of Dong Wanggong, but the change in the East Sea. At the same time, with the appearance of the Ziji state, everything on it was clearly visible. The methods left behind by the Eastern Emperor Tai naturally could not be hidden from everyone. The Eastern Emperor wanted to completely destroy Dong Wanggong. Tai, how dare you do this? No wonder there's still no signs of fellow Taoist returning to this day. So it's all because of you. You secretly did something. On the Immortal Mountain in West Kunlun, when the Queen Mother of the West saw the scene in the Ziji state, her expression changed drastically. She wanted to kill her way to the heavenly court and fight Tai to the death. She was wondering why there were no signs of Dong Wanggong returning after such a long time. It turned out that Tai had locked Dong Wanggong's origin. How could the Queen Mother of the West not be angry? One was the leader of the male immortals. The other was the leader of the female immortals. One was born of the innate yang origin, and the other was born of the innate yin origin. There was no need to talk about the relationship between the Queen Mother of the West and Dong Wanggong. Sai, without the innate origin, even if fellow Taoist returns, his strength will definitely drop greatly. He will have a high cultivation level, but no corresponding strength. Moreover, fellow Taoist has been dead for so long. During this period of time, everyone's strength has improved greatly, especially Tai. He is about to step into the primordial chaos Tao realm. Fellow Taoist is too far behind. Even if he returns, he will not be able to keep up with the times. And now, even the position of the Lord of the East Sea has been snatched away. Fellow Taoist left fewer and fewer backup plans. After a while, the Queen Mother of the West gradually calmed down. She knew that she was no match for the 2 brothers of the heavenly court. If she went to seek revenge on them, other than courting death, there would be no other result. But then, the Queen Mother of the West began to worry. Dong Wanggong had been dead for too long. It had been so long that the world had changed several times. If he did not return, he would probably become an ordinary person. It did not matter if he lost his innate origin. With the foundation of the Queen Mother of the West, she could still help Dong Wanggong recover. But if he lost his luck, it would be difficult to get it back. The Lord of the East Sea not only represented a noble identity, but also a portion of the luck of heaven and earth. This was also one of the things that Dong Wanggong relied on to quickly recover his cultivation after his return. Luck was the most precious treasure in the primordial world. As long as one occupied enough luck of heaven and earth, it was not impossible to obtain the position of a saint. Of course, as the former overlord of the primordial world, Dong Wanggong definitely occupied more than just the East Sea. Even if he lost the luck of the East Sea, it would not affect him much. However, the loss of the East Sea's luck was like a sign that marked the end of Dong Wanggong's era. His Tao could no longer affect heaven and earth. In this way, even if Dong Wanggong could return, he would only be an ordinary Daluo Jinxian and no longer the main character of heaven and earth. Everything that once belonged to him would return to heaven and earth and would have nothing to do with him. I can't wait any longer. If fellow Taoist doesn't return, everything will be gone. Thinking of this, the Queen Mother of the West turned around and rushed towards Mount Shoyang. The Grand Pure One would definitely have a way. Chapter 318. What were the thoughts of those ancient, great divines? What price would the Queen Mother of the West pay in order to resurrect the Duke of the East? These had nothing to do with Xianqing. Now he was peacefully accepting the results that belonged to him. Rumble above the East Sea, specks of light appeared. They were not bright, but they were endless. They gathered into a huge torrent in the air and surged toward Xianqing. This was the fate of the East Sea. On the East Sea, there were countless living beings. Each of them divided a bit of fate and gathered it into the huge fate of the East Sea. And this fate was prepared for the Lord of the East Sea. In the distance, the Ziji state also trembled. Light bloomed, connecting the sky and the earth, stirring up endless wind and clouds. This was the fate of the East Sea that the Duke of the East Sea had controlled when he was the Lord of the East Sea. Now that the East Sea had changed hands, this fate spontaneously transferred to Xianqing, causing the Ziji state to reappear in the world. Puff! It was as if the sound of Tao resounded, echoing between heaven and earth. On top of Xianqing's head, a clear Tao flower bloomed. Waves of immortal light, Tao runes lingered, and the clear air of the 9 heavens filled the air. This was the flower of man. The 12th grade of the flower represented the top aptitude of the primordial world. Of course, this flower of man was slightly inferior to Feng Zichen's flower of human Tao. That was the achievement of human Tao, far from what a human could do. No matter how peerless and stunning you were, without the approval of human Tao, you would not be able to bloom such a flower. With the support of the East Sea's fate, Xianqing's cultivation made another breakthrough. He advanced from the early Daluo Jinxian to the middle stage. He took another small step forward on the path of great Tao. With the transfer of the East Sea's fate, the Ziji state gradually disappeared and returned to the void. However, its coordinates were imprinted in Xianqing's heart. In other words, as long as he wanted, he could use this imprint to take the Ziji state for himself at any time. However, Xianqing did not dare. Even with the Grand Master of Heaven as his backing, he did not dare. In the sky, the Donghuang Tai was paying attention to the Ziji state at all times, in case someone revived the Duke of the East. On the ground, the Queen Mother of the West was silently guarding the Ziji state, in case someone took advantage of the absence of the Duke of the East to occupy the East Sea's #1 holy land. If Xianqing took the Ziji state, it would directly offend of the heavens. That would be too much for him. Donghuang Tai's strength was needless to say. Although the Queen Mother of the West was not as strong as the Eastern Emperor Tai, she was still a top great divine ability expert in the great desolate world. Not to mention, she was a female immortal. In the primordial world, there were not many female great divine abilities. Therefore, these female immortals were extremely familiar with one another and had a good relationship with one another. It could be said that a slight move in one part would affect the entire situation. There was such a huge grudge between the Queen Mother of the West and the Celestial Court, but Dijun didn't do anything to her because he was worried about this. As for the #1 female immortal in the world, what kind of joke was this? He had killed all the male immortals in the world, so why would he care about a female immortal? If not for the fact that she was worried about the female great mediums of the primordial world, the Queen Mother of the West would have left with the Duke of the East under the influence of Dijun's Tai. If the Queen Mother of the West went to the heavenly court for revenge, those female great divinities might not care. However, if Dijun's Tai took the initiative to cause trouble for the Queen Mother of the West, they would definitely attack him together. In the untainted land, everyone had 1 or 2 close friends. At that time, everyone would call for their friends. An entire untainted land would be in chaos. In this way, even the East Sovereign would have to bow his head. Think about it. How could Xianqing dare to provoke such a person that even the heavenly court didn't dare to provoke. It was better not to provoke the Ziji state. It wasn't impossible. When Xianqing was as powerful as the East Sovereign, he might be able to plot a few things with the advantage of location. However, that was the distant future. TSK, TSK, TSK. This is a little different from my original plan. After coming back to his senses, Xianqing sighed. He had only planned to use the opportunity of the gathering of the living beings of the East Sea to promote the teleportation array disk. However, he didn't expect that he would cause so much trouble on a whim. Fate was really unpredictable. However, although he sighed, Xianqing was still very satisfied with the outcome of this matter. With the identity of the Lord of the East Sea, it would undoubtedly be much more convenient for him to do things in the future and save some trouble. At the same time, with the position of the Lord of the East Sea in his hands, Xianqing also had another bold idea. If this idea could be realized, it would bring him much more benefits than the Tao of currency. Moreover, this idea could complement the Tao of currency. Thinking of this, Xianqing made a decision in his heart. Ahem. Fellow Taoists, are you all okay? A few years later, Xianqing saw that everyone present had woken up one after another and couldn't help but ask softly. Daluo Jinxian's breakthrough was extremely powerful. Everyone present was so close to Xianqing, so it was inevitable that they would be affected and injured. However, compared to the benefits they would receive, this little injury was really nothing. Observing Daluo Jinxian's breakthrough was also a great opportunity. As long as they could comprehend a trace of Daluo's Tao, it would be enough for Tai Jinxian to benefit for a lifetime. We're fine. Hearing Xianqing's words, everyone hurriedly replied. Sigh. With a sigh, Xianqing waved his hand, and the clear qi of the 9 heavens filled the air. It was vast and mighty, turning into spots of light that merged into everyone's bodies and healed their injuries. At the same time, it also helped to cleanse their Tao bodies. After all, it was Xianqing who caused the harm. Whether it was intentional or not, he had to be responsible to the end. Fellow Taoists, although Poor Wei's words just now were a little harsh, it was definitely not targeted at you. It was said for those who harbor evil intentions and cause trouble in the East Sea. After all, you also know that the East Sea was too chaotic in the past. Poor Wei is the Lord of the East Sea. Naturally, I have to return the East Sea to peace and quiet. Seeing that everyone was about to bow and worship again, Xianqing hurriedly changed the topic. It was really annoying to bow and worship back and forth. Celestial Lord is right. Most of the people who could come here were from the East Sea. Naturally, they understood what Xianqing meant. From now on, the East Sea would be settled down, and they would no longer have to live in fear. After all, in the East Sea before, the only rhythm was killing. As the Lord of the East Sea, Poor Wei has the responsibility to protect all living things. So, from now on, if anyone is in danger in the East Sea, they can call my name. At that time, Poor Wei will definitely sense it and come to rescue them. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a sudden clap of thunder that shook the surroundings. This was to seek out the voice and rescue the people in distress. In this way, Xianqing's purpose was self-evident. Tai, Heavenly Lord of Salvation from Misery, was also one of the 6 royals of the Heavenly Court, the Eastern Pole Cyan Splendor Emperor. After becoming a spiritual venerable, Xianqing once again launched an attack on the power of the Eastern Pole Cyan Splendor Emperor. This was also his big plan after becoming the Lord of the East Sea. Chapter 319. The East Pole was in the East Sea, and Xianqing was the Lord of the East Sea. Qinghua had the meaning of life and symbolized the Lord of all races. And Xianqing was a spiritual venerable. The great emperor of the East Pole, Qinghua, should be fated with him. Random feelings, boundless vows. Great sage, great mercy, great wish. 10 directions, to save all living beings, in billions of tribulations, to save people immeasurably, to search for feelings, to save people from suffering, spending billions of years, to set up a great ambition to save ordinary people, to accumulate immeasurable merit, to become the emperor of the 6 kingdoms. This was the foundation of the great emperor of the East Pole. To sit firmly on the throne of the 6 kingdoms, one must have immeasurable merit as support. Otherwise, if one's merit did not match the throne, there would be trouble. Now, what Xianqing was doing was what the Tai perfected one did in the future. Using the method of saving all living beings, he accumulated immeasurable merit and increased his prestige. In this way, when the 6 kingdoms were decided, the position of the great emperor of the East Pole would belong to him. Immortal Venerable's great virtue. Hearing this, everyone was deeply moved. This time they were really moved. Since the beginning of the primordial world, there had been many people who had made great contributions to the world and benefited all living beings. But it was the first time someone like Xianqing, who searched for feelings and came to save people from trouble, who could guarantee that they would be safe from disasters. In this way, Xianqing's promise seemed to be extremely useful. Everyone, today's teleportation array disk is the most important. We'll talk about the rest another day. After everything calmed down, Xianqing brought the topic back to the teleportation array disk. This was his real business today. Immortal Venerable, give me one. The work of the Lord of many treasures, painstaking efforts, cannot be looked down upon by the world. Everyone had received so many benefits from Xianqing, so it was naturally impossible for them not to express their gratitude. They didn't want to buy it at first, but now they were too embarrassed to not buy it. Therefore, for a moment, everyone rushed to Xianqing's stall to buy the teleportation array disk. And such a popular scene, as well as the glowing yin-yang creation pills, attracted everyone's attention. As a result, some of the more observant people watched, the more they had different thoughts. Of course, these thoughts didn't refer to going forward to snatch it, but to imitate it. Xianqing could set up a stall to earn the Khanate creation pills, so could they. As for robbing, that was impossible. Tai Jingxian would never do something like snatching Daluo Jingxian, even if he had lost his mind. Otherwise, he would really become the laughingstock of the great desolate Ian, something that could be passed down for generations. However, this was not a good reputation. Those who were quick-witted would make a fortune no matter where they went. This sentence was not wrong in the primordial world. As soon as he had the idea, several people took action and set up a street stall in another part of the sea. No, a sea stall. As for what to sell, that was simply too simple. Ever since the Grand Master of Heaven had preached in the East Sea, there would be a large number of land creatures coming to the East Sea every year to try their luck. These people grew up in the great desolate land. When had they ever seen the scenery of the sea? Even more so, they had never seen the spirit treasures and spirit medicines that only belonged to the Eastern Sea. Therefore, it was hard for them not to be moved by the specialties from the sea. And vice versa. The Eastern Sea life forms had never seen a specialty of the great desolate Ian before. Therefore, after seeing the treasures from the land, they were also curious. After all, what grew in the sea was different from what grew on the land. From the looks of it, this was the general trend. With the right time, place, and people, how could Xianqing's way of currency not prosper? After releasing his spiritual sense to scan, all the changes in the surroundings were reflected in Xianqing's heart. A few extra vendors naturally could not escape his eyes. Seeing the vendors who were trading, Xianqing could not help but reveal a satisfied smile. His plan had succeeded. He would wait for a while to see how the reaction was before deciding whether to proceed with the next step of the plan. After a while, when the novelty in Xianqing's heart faded, he began to get tired of the days of setting up a stall. His heart skipped a beat as he said to Amoyang, "Fellow Taoist Amoyang, poor Wei still has something to do and needs to rush to deal with it. I'll have to trouble you to help poor Wei take care of this stall for a while. Is that okay? No matter what, Mo Yang was the first person to trade with him. It could be said that he had helped him open up the situation. When Xian Qing had benefits, he naturally thought of him first. Yes, immortal supremacy. Go ahead if you have something to do. I will definitely take care of this place properly. Mo Yang was first stunned. Soon after, he replied with some pleasant surprise. How could Xian Qing not benefit from helping him set up a stall? What a pleasant surprise! Aside from feeling envious, the crowd also felt regret in their hearts. It was all their fault for not being observant. Otherwise, such benefits would have fallen on their heads. Thank you, fellow Taoist. Nodding slightly, Xian Qing stood up and left the place. He also sent a voice transmission to Duo Bao, telling him to directly hand the teleportation array disk to Mo Yang after rushing here. In an instant, Xian Qing arrived on Golden Ao Island. At this moment, the disciples of the Jia school had already arrived. Greetings, eldest senior brother. Seeing Xian Qing, everyone hurriedly bowed. Junior brothers, did you see what senior brother did just now? Xian Qing helped everyone up and asked. He was asking them about the stall just now. I saw it. Eldest senior brother and second senior brother are really talented. Even if we spend our entire lives, we can't think of such a treasure like the array disk. Everyone praised when they heard that. The disciples of the Jia school were all array formation experts. When they saw the teleportation array disk, their thoughts were naturally different from the living beings of the East Ocean. What the living beings of the East Ocean saw was the convenience brought by the teleportation array disk. What the disciples of the Jia school saw was the impact the appearance of the array disk had on the entire array formation. The array disk was a further evolution of the array formation. Its appearance represented a huge step forward in the primordial world's array formation. It was broadening the Tao path. In that case, as an array formation cultivator, their future would undoubtedly be brighter and more possibilities would be possible. They had obtained so many benefits and were naturally extremely grateful to Xian Qing and Duo Bao. Unfortunately, they had misunderstood his intentions. Xian Qing asked them about their opinions on setting up a stall. What they replied was their opinions on the array disk. Junior brothers and junior sisters, how do I treat you usually? Everyone was so excited that Xian Qing could not say that they had misunderstood. He could only change his strategy. Senior brother treats us very well. Although they did not know Xian Qing's motive, everyone still answered honestly. That was the truth. Xian Qing was indeed very good to them. He even gave them some treasures from time to time. They could not find a second senior brother like him in the entire primordial world. Then I'll help you with a small favor. Junior brothers, you don't mind, right? Xian Qing smiled mysteriously and said, I don't mind. Senior brother, feel free to speak. Everyone agreed to Xian Qing's request. Did you see the stall I set up just now? I hope that before Master preaches the next time, junior brothers and junior sisters outside Golden Ao Island, each of you will set up a stall and sell some things that you don't need. Chapter 320. It was empty, lonely, and dangerous. There was no top, bottom, left, or right. There was no passage of time. It was truly boundless. This was the chaos outside the realm, the place where the great Tao lived in seclusion, the place where everything originated, and also the most dangerous place in the world. And Feng Zichen was cultivating in seclusion here. While Xian Qing was developing his business in the East Sea, Feng Zichen's seclusion had also reached the most critical moment. Rumble. The chaos array operated crazily, and the great Tao divine diagram intertwined with endless laws. Vast divine power spread out, distorting all known concepts, He refined all the chaotic energy in the surroundings and poured it into Feng Zichen's body. One could see that the flower of the heavenly Tao and the flower of the human Tao automatically appeared above Feng Zichen's head. They swayed and took root in the chaos, absorbing the power of the great Tao to strengthen themselves. Between them, the corresponding essence energy of the great Tao constantly trembled, releasing all kinds of Taoist rhymes. It was incomparably mysterious. There was also a surge of vitality, as if a Tao flower was about to bloom. The injury that the Dongwang Tai left to Feng Zichen completely disappeared at this moment. Not only that, but he also benefited from the disaster and showed signs of taking another step forward. He was about to break through to the realm of Daluo Jingxian and completely bloom the flower of the earth. However, this impulse to break through was forcefully suppressed by Feng Zichen, and he gave up this rare opportunity. He didn't want to break through at this moment. Right now, he had already bloomed 2 of the 3 flowers that represented the 3 Taos of heaven, earth, and man. He was only 1 step away from the legendary great Taoist priests. If Feng Zichen took advantage of this opportunity to break through, the Tao flower that bloomed would only be the flower of the earth and not the stronger flower of the earth. In this way, if the 3 flowers were not perfected, he would not be able to attain the great Taoist priests. Then, wouldn't his previous efforts be in vain? Therefore, even if the opportunity to break through was rare, he couldn't break through now. He had to wait until the earth turned into reincarnation and seize the opportunity to break through with the help of the Taoist realms of the earth. Only then would the blooming Tao flower be in Tao flower. Only then could the 3 flowers be perfected. With this, one could become the great Taoist priests and become the first person in the Daluo Jingxian. The great Taoist priests was the title the world gave to Pengu. The one who obtained this fruit was destined to become the origin Daluo Jingxian. Therefore, even if Feng Zichen had an opportunity to break through to Sage to Be, he would refuse it without hesitation and continue to wait for the opportunity to become great Taoist priests. He could still tell which was more important. I've been in the outer realm primal chaos for so long. Standing up, Feng Zichen stepped into the chaos bead and returned to the untainted land through the chaos channel. And with his departure, the chaos array also disappeared. The chaos that had been clamoring for a long time regained its calm. When Feng Zichen reappeared, he was already above the human clan's ancestral temple. However, he did not return to the human clan. Instead, he walked straight to the East Sea. It was time to take back the sea-calming divine pearl. It was also time to hand over the One Origin Tao talisman to Xianqing. Today he was going to meet Xianqing. At this time, more than 1,000 years had passed since Xianqing passed down the teleportation array disk. The East Sea had long changed its appearance, and the one that had changed the most was undoubtedly Penglai Island. Outside Penglai Island, a wide street appeared on the surface of the sea. Inside, there were all kinds of vendors and pedestrians coming and going. It was bustling and lively. All kinds of things in the mortal world were in it. Being in the middle of the street, Feng Zichen had an illusion that he was not in the untainted land, but a street in the future. However, the colorful treasures in front of him, as well as the colorful clouds floating in front of him, reminded him that this was the untainted land, the extremely dangerous untainted land, the untainted land where he could lose his life at any time. In an instant, Feng Zichen cut off all distracting thoughts and strengthened his heart to pursue the Tao. It's not that I like to scheme, but the world is like this. If you don't scheme against others, others will scheme against you. The environment is like this, so what can I do? Looking at the lively street in front of him, Feng Zichen thought silently. In the untainted land, who could say who was the chess piece, who was the chess player, and who was controlling everything behind the scenes? Retracting his thoughts, Feng Zichen continued to walk towards Penglai Island. As for this street, it was the result of Xianqing. Ever since Xian Qing first set up a stall that day, there had been a craze for setting up stalls in the East Sea. As long as there was a lot of traffic, there would definitely be stalls. After that, the disciples of the Jia school set up stalls outside Golden Island to sell all kinds of array discs, which pushed the craze to the extreme. It seemed that if they did not set up a stall, they would not be able to prove that they were creatures of the East Sea. Stalls appeared all over the East Sea. Even the aquatic creatures in the sea were influenced and started to set up their stalls. It made the treasures of the East Sea more abundant. It could be said that the current East Sea was the place with the most types of treasures in the untainted land. Here, one could find specialties from any place in the untainted land. There were so many types that it was beyond imagination. After all, the power of money was great. Some people earned connate creation pills from setting up stalls that they had never seen before in their lives. Naturally, they had bigger ideas. Especially now that there were teleportation array discs, many ideas that could not be realized in the past could become a reality. Under the stimulation of huge benefits, some people used teleportation arrays to cross endless mountains and rivers to various places in the untainted land to collect all kinds of specialties and return to the East Sea to sell. This also caused the prosperity of the East Sea. However, as more and more merchants gathered near Golden Island, it was inevitable that this place would become noisy. Afraid that they would disturb his master's cultivation, Xian Qing opened up the sea near Penglai Island and moved all the merchants there. In this way, it was convenient for Xian Qing to manage, so that there would not be trouble in the future. Moreover, Xian Qing even gave this street a name, Penglai Sea City. In the future, there were markets in the cultivation world. It was a place for cultivators to trade. Penglai Sea City had the same function. However, it was built on the sea, so it was called Sea City. Fellow Taoist, please wait. Outside Penglai Island, Feng Zichen stopped for a while and was about to step in. Suddenly, an anxious shout came from behind him, making him stop in his tracks. Feng Zichen recognized the owner of the voice. It was Mo Yang. This person was very fond of him. Therefore, after Xian Qing established Penglai Sea City, he handed it over to him to manage. And he did not let Xian Qing down. He managed Penglai Sea City in an orderly manner without the slightest bit of trouble. Therefore, he gave Mo Yang face and stopped in his tracks. Fellow Taoist, this is your first time in Penglai Sea City, right? Flying in front of Feng Zichen, Mo Yang bowed and asked. However, although he used the question as a question, his tone was full of certainty. Chapter 321. Feng Zichen recognized Mo Yang, but Mo Yang didn't recognize him, because Mo Yang knew Xian Qing. He had never experienced two bodies at once, so he didn't know the mystery. What's the matter? Without answering Mo Yang's question, Feng Zichen asked in amusement. His cultivation had already reached the realm of returning to his original state, and his aura didn't leak at all. If a celestial immortal looked at him, he would be a celestial immortal. If a golden immortal looked at him, he would be a golden immortal. If a Tai Jinxian looked at him, he would be a Tai Jinxian. Therefore, in Mo Yang's eyes, Feng Zichen was a relatively unfamiliar Tai Jinxian cultivator. Otherwise, how could he dare to stop Feng Zichen and call him fellow Taoist? Fellow Taoist, you might not know, but ahead is the forbidden area of Penglai Sea City. Without the permission of the immortal venerable, outsiders are not allowed to enter. Moreover, outside the forbidden area, there is a connate formation protecting it. Its power is so strong that even if the Daluo Taoist priests came, it would be difficult for them to end well. If you take another step forward, you will step into the formation. At that time, the danger will be unpredictable. Penglai Sea City was outside Penglai Island. Others didn't know the exact location of Penglai Island, but as the steward appointed by Xian Qing, how could Mo Yang not know? Today he came to patrol the various sea areas as usual. He happened to see Feng Zichen standing outside Penglai Island, so he hurriedly ran over. In fact, with Xianqing overseeing 3 Immortal Island, even if someone entered the formation by mistake, Xianqing could rescue them in time. It was impossible for Mo Yang to not understand. Therefore, he was not really worried about whether Feng Zichen would be in danger after falling into the formation. What he was worried about was that if Feng Zichen entered the formation by mistake and disturbed Xianqing, that would be bad. This was Mo Yang's goal. It had to be said that Xianqing had chosen the right person to be the steward. When he did things, he was both attentive and careful, saving Xianqing a lot of trouble. Haha, you're very interesting. I want you to know that Poor Wei and your Immortal Venerable are good friends, Feng Zichen said with a smile. How could Mo Yang's thoughts be hidden from him? At the end of his speech, he even slightly revealed a wisp of aura. I didn't know that the Taoist priests would come and offended the Taoist priests. I hope the Taoist priests can forgive me. After being exposed by Feng Zichen, Mo Yang was originally a little embarrassed. But after feeling the unique aura of the Daluo Taoist priests, his face completely changed. Without time to think, Mo Yang hurriedly apologized. What had he done? To address the Daluo Taoist priests as fellow Taoist? Do you want to die? You're too arrogant. This is nothing. The Poor Wei still has something to ask Xianqing. You can go and do your thing. Waving his hand, Feng Zichen let Mo Yang leave. At the same time on Penglai Island, Duo Bao, the goddess of golden spirit, the goddess of Wudong, the 3 Xiao, Zhao Gongming, and other famous immortals of Jie School were invited by Xianqing to gather and discuss the Tao. During this period, there was endless laughter. It was very happy. Junior brothers and sisters, I have a close friend who has arrived. I need to go and welcome him. Please excuse me for a while. Please forgive me. Just as everyone was talking, Xianqing suddenly spoke and interrupted everyone's conversation. Oh, senior brother's good friend? Senior brother is so extraordinary. I think senior brother's close friend should also be a stunning figure in the primordial world. I wonder if we can have the honor of meeting him? Just as Xianqing finished speaking and was about to leave, the goddess of turtle spirit suddenly spoke. They had never heard Xianqing mention that he had any close friends. Now that one had suddenly appeared, everyone was naturally very curious. Yes, senior brother will bring him over later and let you meet him. Xianqing nodded and agreed. Just as Feng Zichen was about to arrive, Xianqing gathered the disciples of Jie School to rush over for a gathering. He wanted Feng Zichen to get familiar with everyone so that it would be convenient for his future plans. Could it be? Suddenly, Duobao's heart skipped a beat. He thought of the identity of the person who had come. He suddenly stood up and shouted at Xianqing excitedly, Senior brother, let's go together. I'm going as well. That was the sword ancestor, the true master of a Tao in the primordial world. He did not rely on his cultivation realm and strength, but on his supreme wisdom to create his own Tao. That was an achievement that even saints could not achieve. Who in the primordial world did not admire such a person? Now that he had arrived, Duo Bao naturally had to personally welcome him to express his respect. All right, let's go together. With a wave of his sleeve, Xianqing led the people of Jie School and rushed out of Penglai Island to welcome Feng Zichen. Feng Zichen. Haha. Good friend, we haven't seen each other for tens of thousands of years since we parted in the East Sea. Why don't you go to Kunlun Mountain to see me? I can't leave Kunlun Mountain. Can't you leave the human race? Xianqing complained as soon as he saw Feng Zichen from afar. Do you think everyone is as free as you? I'm very busy. I don't have time to go to Kunlun Mountain to look for you. Feng Zichen shook his head and smiled. As Xianqing and Feng Zichen met, Feng Zichen's true spirit, who was high in Zue Star, had a wonderful experience. It was just like in the future, when he controlled 2 alternate accounts to cheat people in the chat group. It was a feeling that he had not felt for a long time. His main body was in Ziwei Star, silently controlling Xianqing and Feng Zichen to walk in the primordial world for him. In the future, he hid behind the computer and controlled 2 alternate accounts at the same time, or even more, to rampage on the internet. If the primordial world was regarded as an online world, then wouldn't Feng Zichen's actions be the same? There was no harm in opening more alternate accounts on the internet. Even if the main account was banned, there were still alternate accounts as a backup. It was the same principle to open more alternate accounts in the primordial world. Even if the main body died accidentally, he could rely on the alternate accounts to rise again. It would not be completely hopeless. Feng Zichen, who had suffered from the title in the future, deeply understood this principle. "Senior brother, how should I address this fellow Taoist?" Yun Xiao asked Xianqing softly. The disciple of a saint was naturally not someone Mo Yang could compare to. Mo Yang could not see Feng Zichen's realm, but the disciples of Jie School could see some clues. In their eyes, Feng Zichen was wearing the 10,000 spirits golden crown and a purple gold robe. Purple energy surrounded his body, making him look like a majestic emperor. When they looked at him, it was as if they were facing the vast starry sky. It was incomparably deep and could contain everything. But when they looked at Feng Zichen again, everything changed again. The previous state of the emperor had completely disappeared. What replaced it was endless sharpness. It was like a peerless divine sword, displaying its sharpness to its heart's content. It was incomparably sharp, as if it wanted to cut through everything. It was so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. There was no need to think carefully. This was definitely a figure who shocked the primordial world. He is Pangu's Zichen clan is also the primordial sword ancestor. With a smile, Xianqing revealed Feng Zichen's background. Chapter 322. Sword Ancestor. Primordial Sword Ancestor. In an instant, the disciples of the Jie School were energized. They stared at Feng Zichen with bright eyes filled with curiosity and admiration. One had to know that the Grand Master of Heaven was not only the ancestral master of the Array Dao, but he was also a mighty figure of the Sword Dao. His Dao weapon was the Qingping sword. Due to this, the disciples of the Jie School more or less knew 1 or 2 sword techniques. Although they could not reach the Dao realm, they were quite proficient. That was not a big deal. But after Feng Zichen established the Khanate Sword Dao, all the sword cultivators of the primordial world improved. It was also at this moment that the disciples of the Jie School suddenly realized that the sword techniques that they did not value in the past had suddenly become shockingly powerful. It could be said to be unparalleled in killing. In the blink of an eye, the strength of all the sword cultivators of the primordial world had increased. That was something that even their master, the Grand Master of Heaven, could not do. As such, everyone naturally admired Feng Zichen. Moreover, they were the direct beneficiaries of the birth of the Khanate Sword Dao. In that case, all the sword cultivators of the primordial world still owed Feng Zichen karma, and all of that would have to be returned in the future. Jie School has many treasures. Jie School has nothing to do with it. Jie School's Xiao Gongming. Greetings, sword ancestor. After the shock, everyone hurriedly bowed to Feng Zichen. At this moment, they were no longer disciples of the Jie School, but sword cultivators of the primordial world. When they saw the ancestral master, they naturally had to bow. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The moment the disciples of the Jie School bowed, the divine swords on their bodies automatically appeared and surrounded Feng Zichen as if they were worshipping him. The divine swords had spirits and spontaneously bowed to the master of the Sword Dao. Fellow Taoists, you're too polite. Feng Zichen gently helped everyone up and said with a smile, "All right, this is Senior Brother's best friend. You don't have to be so polite. Just treat him as your senior brother." Xianqing also said. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. During this period of time, Feng Zichen and the disciples of the Jie school talked about the Tao and exchanged cultivation insights. They lived a happy life. However, as the time for the Grand Master of Heaven's lecture approached, the disciples of Jie school had no choice but to leave and head to Golden Ao Island to listen to the Tao. Thus, only Feng Zichen and Xianqing were left on Penglai Island. This meant that Feng Zichen didn't have to pretend anymore. For a moment, the scene was silent. "Let's start." Suddenly, Xianqing and Feng Zichen said at the same time. Then, the first Yuan Dao talisman flew out of Feng Zichen's body and landed in Xianqing's hand. 24 sea-calming divine pearls flew out of Xianqing's body and landed in Feng Zichen's hands. The two of them were originally one, so there was no distinction between you and me. Therefore, the two of them shared their treasures, and there was no need to refine them a second time. After changing his Dharma treasures, Feng Zichen silently disappeared from Penglai Island. In the next moment, Feng Zichen appeared in the deepest part of the boundless void, in the mysterious, unknown place. "Let's go." Feng Zichen took out the chaos bead and walked in. He passed through the chaos passageway and arrived in the chaos outside the realm again. With the sea-calming divine pearl in hand, he naturally had to repair the chaos bead. And in this world, what was more suitable for the recovery of the chaos bead than the chaos outside the realm? The chaos bead was ultimately a treasure born in the chaos outside the realm. It was like a child of the great Tao, as noble and great as the chaos fiend celestial. Returning here was like a child who had not returned home for a long time. He was loved by his parents and had endless opportunities. It was much better than advancing in the primordial world. If he continued to advance in the primordial world, the heavenly Tao might cause trouble again. That would be troublesome. It was safer to advance in the chaos outside the realm. Go. He took out the sea-calming divine pearl and saw 24 azure pearls floating in the air, emitting an ocean-like glow. As the light flickered, it was like waves of waves. Then, Feng Zichen didn't hesitate to put the 24 sea-calming divine pearls into the chaos bead. He didn't care about their many years of friendship. He was really cold and heartless. Now, the chaos bead was a connate cardinal treasure. Its power was boundless and far from what it used to be. When it devoured the other connate spirit treasures, its speed was naturally much faster than before. It shook slightly, and the sea-calming divine pearl was immediately shattered into pieces and devoured by it. Rumble! Resplendent divine light erupted as vast power surged, stirring up the chaos in all directions, setting off huge waves that surged violently. After devouring the sea-calming divine pearl, the chaos bead, which had been on the verge of advancing, finally began to advance. As the chaos bead advanced, the entire chaos outside the realm trembled and resonated with it. The tyrannical chaos chi also became abnormally docile and spontaneously surged over to help it complete its transformation. At the same time, in the deepest part of the chaos outside the realm, the most mysterious and unknown place in the world, a mighty and vast will awakened. Mysterious and unfathomable. It's the great Tao. What kind of terrifying power was that? In front of it, Feng Zichen felt that he couldn't resist. He felt that he was incomparably small, inferior to even an ant. His performance was even worse than when he faced Panga's power. In fact, Feng Zichen didn't even have the courage to look him in the eye. It was as if he took a look at the great Tao, he would be lost in it forever and never be able to turn back. Facing the heavenly Tao, although Feng Zichen couldn't resist it, at least he had the courage to face him. However, Facing the great Tao, he had no power at all. He couldn't even think. These were two completely different powers. They were greater, more vast, and more desirable. This was the power of the great Tao, a power that was higher than the heavenly Tao. It was also the power that Pangu had been pursuing. Now he had truly appeared in front of Feng Zichen, displaying his greatness and endless mysteries to his heart's content. Unfortunately, under the impact of the power of the great Tao, Feng Zichen's mind was blank. He had temporarily lost all consciousness. He couldn't see or know anything. This could be said to be the greatest opportunity in the world, but he couldn't see it. However, Feng Zichen had lost consciousness, but the Hongmeng Daozhong in his sea of consciousness moved. A purple light flashed, and the Hongmeng Daozhong appeared automatically. It spun in the air, and wisps of Hongmeng aura spread out, imprinting all the mysteries of the great Tao on its body. As expected of the supreme treasure that could bring Feng Zichen across endless years and travel to the primitive world. It was clearly only a supreme-grade innate spirit treasure, but it had the ability that even innate cardinal treasures couldn't compare to. It could even steal the power of the great Tao. It was as if the restrictions of level and the gap between realms didn't exist in front of it. It was really incredible. But at the same time, Feng Zichen, who was unaware of this magical scene, couldn't detect it. And as more and more of the charm of the great Tao was imprinted on the Hongmeng Daozhong, a wonderful change happened. Chapter 3:23. As more and more marks of the Great Path were imprinted, the Chaos Demon God imprints that were previously imprinted on Hongmeng Daozhong's body suddenly moved. Their movements were not obvious. They were just extremely subtle adjustments. However, this slight movement brought about a shocking change. This movement made the 3,000 Chaos Demon God imprints more in line with the Great Path. It was as if they had resonated with the Great Path, and an inexplicable Tao was born. It was incomparably great and similar to the Great Path. Wisps of Tao flowed, and the Chaos Demon God imprints became more and more real and perfect. It was as if they had come alive and wanted to cross all obstacles and walk out of Hongmeng Daozhong's body. The Chaos Demon God was originally a creature born from the will of the Great Path. It was the image of the Great Path reflected in the great chaos outside the realm. It was the embodiment of its power outside. Therefore, the Great Path's Tao was a great supplement for the Chaos Demon God imprints. Devouring the Great Path's Tao could make them more perfect. Previously, Hongmeng Daozhong had imprinted the Chaos Demon God imprints either by relying on their aura, observing their Great Path bodies, or absorbing the Tao shadows in Feng Zichen's memory. With the help of his powerful ability, he deduced the Chaos Demon God imprints from these fragmented remnants. The Chaos Demon God imprints obtained through this method were inevitably somewhat incomplete and had some flaws. They were not so perfect. Although they were still powerful, he always felt that something was missing. After all, in terms of the Great Path, the slightest mistake was the difference of 1,000 miles. The impact of a single flaw was like the difference between heaven and earth. Thus, not even the slightest flaw could be tolerated. The influence was too great, and the more perfect it was, the better. Now, at the moment of the Chaos Bead's advancement, the Great Path had descended. Endless Tao runes covered the chaos, giving birth to endless mysteries, which were recorded and imprinted by Hongmeng Daozhong. It made up for the flaws of the Chaos Demon God imprints and eliminated their flaws, making them perfect and closer to the Great Path. At this moment, Hongmeng Daozhong had completely changed. The 3,000 Chaos Demon God imprints chanted in unison, emitting the sound of the Great Path that resounded through the chaos. Endless runes were born, and Tao and reason intertwined, covering the body of the Hongmeng Daozhong bell. 3,000 laws descended, and the aura of the Tao was deep like an ocean. It warped the chaos and re-established order, and it fully revealed the Xuanqi of the Grand Tao, the Tao Bell, the Bell of Order. After the 3,000 demonic imprints were completed, Hongmeng Daozhong seemed to have become the carrier of the great Tao. It was completely composed of Tao and reason. It resonated with the great Tao and gave birth to its own order. Roar, roar, roar! Phantoms of demonic gods appeared one after another, circling around Hongmeng Daozhong as they continuously inhaled and exhaled chaotic qi. After being refined by the chaos demonic god, the chaos qi underwent a wonderful change. The formless properties of the original substance gradually disappeared, and it returned to the state of nothingness. Soon after, a strand of energy appeared, and then it took form, and then it developed substance. In the end, a body was born from both form and essence. These were the cosmos' 5 manifestations, the 5 processes of the birth of heaven and earth. It was also the key to Hongmeng Daozhong's advancement into a connate cardinal treasure. Streams of chaos qi were transformed by the chaos demonic gods' phantoms into the purest cosmos' 5 manifestations. They continuously fused into Hongmeng Daozhong's body, urging it to transform to a higher level. Creation. This was a great creation. The cosmos' 5 manifestations was formed from the origin that was emitted during the evolution of heaven and earth. It had the power to create something out of nothing and create everything. Even connate spiritual treasures could be created out of nothing. As long as there was enough cosmos' 5 manifestations, even connate god fiends could be created out of nothing. This was one of the greatest powers in the world. It had all the known characteristics and was almost omnipotent. It was the power of Tao. Now, with the help of the Tao aura emitted by the great Tao, Hongmeng Daozhong had completed its self-improvement. It took the initiative to evolve the cosmos' 5 manifestations to accelerate its advancement, just like its own cultivation. This was, of course, a good thing. However, this did not mean that Feng Zichen did not need to search for the cosmos' 5 manifestations' origins. The advancement of a connate spiritual treasure required an enormous amount of power, just like how Daluo Jingxian broke through to the sage-to-be level. Without the help of external forces, it could only rely on the accumulation of endless years. Therefore, if Feng Zichen wanted Hongmeng Daozhong to become a connate spiritual treasure as soon as possible, he still needed to find the cosmos' 5 manifestations' origins. Otherwise, he would have to wait for a long time. Not necessarily. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Feng Zichen's mind as he thought of a wonderful idea. He could upgrade the primordial chaos Tao Bell without the connate 5 essences. Since the primordial chaos Tao Bell could transform the primordial chaos qi into the primordial 5 cosmos qi, it could also transform the primordial chaos origin into the primordial 5 cosmos origin. Of course, chaos origin was also very noble, but Feng Zichen had the chaos bead and the world tree. Every tens of thousands of years, he could always gather some chaos origin. In this way, Hongmeng Daozhong's advancement speed would undoubtedly be greatly accelerated. It would only take 1 or 2 eons to complete. It would not be like before, where it had to rely on transforming chaos qi to advance. Who knew how long it would take? This method is feasible. Let's give it a try first. Feng Zichen took out the chaos origin he had collected before and injected it into Hongmeng Daozhong. Rumble. As the chaos origin entered Hongmeng Daozhong, visible to the naked eye, it underwent a drastic change. Precepts were born, like divine chains of order, emitting a terrifying power. At the same time, the shadow of the chaos demon god became more and more real, as if it had flesh and blood. Inexplicable patterns appeared, mysterious and unfathomable, describing the most fundamental principles of the world. It was not until the power of chaos origin was exhausted that the changes in Hongmeng Daozhong gradually calmed down. It works. Seeing this, Feng Zichen could not help but show a hint of joy. This meant that his plan to use the chaos origin to replace the primordial 5 essences was completely feasible. The hope of advancing Hongmeng Daozhong did not need to be pinned on the primordial 5 essences. It was not that he did not want to use the primordial 5 essences to advance Hongmeng Daozhong, but it was too difficult to find. Even if he searched the entire untainted land, he would not be able to find it. The power of this thing was simply heaven-defying, and it was of great use to saints. If it could be found, it would have been discovered and taken away long ago. How could Feng Zichen have the chance to think about it? If it was not for the fact that he was forced to do so, Feng Zichen would not have such a bad idea. Opportunity, only a heaven-defying opportunity, could get the primordial 5 essences. However, there were many kinds of opportunities. Who could say for sure what kind of opportunity could lead to the primordial 5 essences? Take Feng Zichen, for example. He had several primordial treasures. His opportunities were great, and his luck was strong. However, he could not get the primordial 5 essences that he wanted and needed the most. What could he do? Chapter 3:24. Achieving one's wish. That was what everyone hoped for. But in history, no one had ever heard of anyone who could do it. Not to mention a saint, even Pangu could not do it. Perhaps the great Tao could. Perhaps that was why Pangu wanted to prove the great Tao. To him, if he did not achieve the great Tao, he would not be free and would be restricted everywhere. He could not be omnipotent. If Pangu wanted a connate numinous treasure, chaos would naturally sense it and create one for him. If he wanted a connate numinous treasure, although it would be troublesome, chaos could still create it for him after spending some time. But what if he wanted a chaos numinous treasure? Could chaos still create it for him? Obviously he couldn't. However, the great Tao could, because the great Tao was omnipotent. What Pangu could do, the great Tao could do too. What Pangu could not do, the great Tao could still do. Therefore, Pangu wanted to prove the great Tao to be as great as him, as omnipotent as him. And what Pangu could not do, a saint naturally could not do. Then it was even more impossible for Feng Zichen to do it. Whether he could obtain the connate 5 grand origins or not depended on his fate. Although Daluo Jingxian had transcended the river of fate and obtained the ability to control his own fate. That was all. What they controlled was only their own fate. Daluo Jingxian could change his own fate and arrange an incomparably bright future for himself. He could even plan the path to becoming a saint and become a saint through this. However, there was more than one Daluo Jingxian. If you could arrange the path to becoming a saint for yourself, then others could too. In this way, the path would be narrow. There were only a few saint positions, but there were so many people competing. They could only rely on their own methods. But without a doubt, the first person to prove Daluo Jingxian's Tao would definitely obtain the greatest benefits. That was because no one could compete with him. He could plan everything for himself at will, allowing the future to have countless possibilities and achieve unimaginable achievements. In fact, that was indeed the case. As the first Daluo Jingxian to attain the Tao, Tao ancestor Hong Jun's achievements were obvious to everyone in the primordial world. Therefore, in the primordial world, being born early was the greatest opportunity. Daluo Jingxian, the supreme existence in the legends. However, he was restrained everywhere in the primordial world. He lived even more carefully. How helpless! After a long time, Feng Zichen sighed. It was true that the stronger one was, the more insignificant one felt. Originally, he thought that as long as he became the Daluo Jingxian, he would be completely safe. Even if he couldn't dominate the world, he could still live a carefree life. But when he really became Daluo Jingxian, he found that there were too many forces in the untainted land that could kill, Daluo Jingxian. Only demi-saints were truly safe. In theory, Daluo Jingxian was great. The eternal 3 flowers above his head, the Chaoyuan 5 qi in his chest, jumped out of the long river of fate, attained the Tao of the universe, and was eternally unique. He was the Daluo. As long as he attained the Tao of the Daluo, he could be reborn with a drop of blood, and his true spirit would not be destroyed. With a thought, he could destroy the worlds in the heavens. This was the real Daluo Jingxian. However, the primordial world was still too powerful. It was so powerful that even saints were not at the peak. Correspondingly, compared to the huge primordial world, the Daluo Jingxian was much smaller. Under the shroud of the primordial world's rules, all kinds of abilities could not be used. This caused the Daluo Jingxian to be in an awkward situation. However, if the Daluo Jingxian were to be placed in the upper-class world or even the medium-class world, then they would be the supreme masters, almost omnipotent. Whatever they wanted, as long as it was in the world, would automatically appear in front of them. It was as good as it could be. It was more powerful than the saints. Compared to this, what was the point of having one's wish come true? This was the ability that the Daluo Jingxian should have. However, that was in the upper-class world, not the primordial world. No matter how exciting these worlds were, the Daluo Jingxian of the primordial world would not go there, because when they got there, their path of the great path would end. The Daluo Jingxian was the upper limit of the upper-class world. There was no possibility of going any further, and people were always dissatisfied. After experiencing a higher scenery, who would be willing to look back on the past? The primordial world was the place to achieve the Tao. Boom! Just as Feng Zichen was lost in thought, something happened in the great chaos outside the realm. It suddenly shook and woke him up. This is the chaos bead. It turned out that with the help of the great Tao, the advancement of the chaos bead had reached the most critical moment. One had to know that the great Tao descended for the chaos bead, not for Hongming Daozhong. Therefore, the greatest creation naturally had to be reflected on him. In the depths of the chaos, wisps of purple brilliance surged out. They were overflowing with colors and filled with Tao runes. Endless mysteries circulated and merged into the chaos bead. That was the lingering charm of the great Tao. It contained the most essential power of the great Tao. It could help people break through to the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. It was the carrier of the Tao. At the same time, the surrounding chaos qi crazily surged toward the chaos bead. Wherever they passed, a strong wind blew, causing Feng Zichen to almost lose his balance. It could be seen how crazy they were. Buzz, accompanied by a resplendent light, the chaos bead completed its transformation. In an instant, a terrifying power swept out, and the surrounding chaos qi instantly became docile and was suppressed by the chaos bead. The chaos bead was a supreme treasure nurtured by the great Tao. It had the power to suppress the chaos. Why would the chaos bead be involved in the heaven-splitting tribulation for no reason? That was because Pengu had opened the heavens beside it. Only where the chaos bead was, the chaos bead was the safest. All the violence and chaos were suppressed and became extremely docile. It also became the most suitable for opening the heavens. The chaos bead played a part in Pengu breaking open the origin of the chaos bead. Therefore, it was not wrong for it to be hit by Pengu's axe. How could the karma of the great Tao be so easy to form? The chaos bead was the home of the great Tao. Pengu's opening of the primordial world was equivalent to digging up the corner of the great Tao. Moreover, he used the corner of the great Tao as material to build a home of his own near the great Tao. Pengu's arrogance was so arrogant that the great Tao could not tolerate it. That was why the 3,000 demon gods blocked the great Tao. Pengu died, and the great Tao transformed into heaven and earth. The reason why Pango faked his death and hid in the primordial world without showing his face might be one of the reasons. But more importantly, it was probably to avoid the karma of the Great Tao. After all, he had destroyed the home of the Great Tao. What a fortune! Standing beside the chaos bead, Feng Zichen's face was filled with disbelief. At this moment, a mark of the Great Tao appeared on the chaos bead's body. It flickered indeterminately, releasing endless mysteries that were fascinating. Behind the mark of the Great Tao, 47 divine chains of order appeared. They surrounded each other as if they were describing the truth of chaos. That was not a connate divine restriction, but a chaos Tao restriction. Chapter 3:25. The Chaos Tao restriction was a restriction derived from the Great Tao and was unique to Chaos Numinous treasures. In other words, under the power of the Great Tao, the Chaos bead transformed from a connate cardinal treasure into a Chaos Numinous treasure and truly returned to its original form. Even if a cardinal treasure born from the Chaos was shattered, it should still be a Chaos Numinous treasure. Why did it transform into a connate cardinal treasure? Obviously, it was suppressed by the primordial world. Even if it was a treasure born from the chaos, it had to follow the rules of the primordial world. The primordial world was that domineering. Although chaos numinous treasures and connate cardinal treasures had the same power, there was an essential difference. It was the difference between the heavenly Tao and the Great Tao. Chaos numinous treasures were Dharma treasures born from the Great Tao and could be used in all worlds. In the chaos, they were chaos numinous treasures. In the great world, they were connate cardinal treasures. Connate cardinal treasures were different. They were Dharma treasures born from the heavenly Tao. If they left the primordial world and entered the chaos, their power would definitely be limited and inconvenient. Of course, the 3 heaven-splitting treasures were not included. It was a cardinal treasure transformed from Panga's axe. It was not an issue to call it a chaos numinous treasure. However, in order to comply with the rules of the primordial world, it appeared in the world as a connate cardinal treasure. Not bad. This is what the chaos bead should look like. At that moment, Feng Zichen was filled with excitement as he looked at the chaos bead. After becoming a chaos numinous treasure, the chaos bead finally had a trace of its former glory as a chaos numinous treasure. It was the work of a mighty figure that suppressed the chaos and endless space-time. At that moment, beside the chaos bead, Feng Zichen seemed to have an illusion that he was in the primordial world. It was as if the chaos chi that was wandering around him was not chaos chi, but connate chi. The chaos chi here was too docile. It was as if it had been refined, like the connate chi in the primordial world. It flowed slowly and allowed others to absorb it without any resistance. Suppress the chaos. The chaos chi here was completely suppressed by the chaos bead. All concepts related to chaos were twisted, changed, and transformed in a beneficial direction. The place that was originally filled with danger turned into a cultivation, holy land in an instant. It was not inferior to the top grotto heavens of the primordial world. The profundity of creation and the power of the chaos bead could be seen from this. Moreover, the changes in the chaos bead did not stop there. At the center of the chaos bead, where the chaos passageway was located, a gigantic door stood majestically. Space-time Tao rhymes flowed around it, accompanied by the glow of time. It was incomparably terrifying. This was the Chaos Door, a chaos spirit treasure born from the Chaos Pearl, and it possessed the ability to pass through everything. Through him, he could go to any place he had ever been, be it the past or the future. He could travel through time and space, make people go back to the past to make up for their regrets, and make people rush to the future to change their fate. He could also travel through the various great worlds at will without having to see the world walls. This was a space-time attribute, supreme treasure. However, the current him was only a phantom and did not have a real body. He was far from having such great power. Now he could only allow Feng Zichen to freely travel to and from the great chaos outside the realm. He had no other abilities. After all, nurturing chaos spiritual treasures was the ability of chaos ultimate treasures. However, the current chaos bead was only a chaos spiritual treasure. Naturally, it could not nurture Dharma treasures of the same level. Just one phantom was the limit of the chaos bead. Otherwise, he would be too heaven-defying. Where's the world tree? Suddenly, Feng Zichen's heart skipped a beat. He thought of something and suddenly looked at the world tree. The chaos bead had obtained such a great fortune. There was no reason that the world tree in his body did not obtain any benefits. After scanning the chaos bead with his spiritual sense, Feng Zichen found the world tree in a corner. At this moment, his appearance had changed greatly. It could be said that the world tree before was very big, so big that it was beyond imagination. It was almost as tall as the sky. But now the world tree's body had shrunk rapidly, becoming the size of an ordinary tree. If it were not for the fact that his body was full of great Tao patterns, like a Tao tree, showing that he was different from the rest, Feng Zichen would have thought that he had seen wrongly. Looking at the world tree, Feng Zichen frowned and thought for a while. Suddenly he revealed his Tao body. In an instant, Panga's Tao body, which was 1,000,000 feet tall, appeared and stood proudly in the chaos. This was not an illusion, nor was it a divine power, nor was it the celestial phenomenon. It was Feng Zichen's real physical body. That's right, this was his physical body. It was 1,000,000 feet tall physical body. At his level of cultivation, he had long been the embodiment of great Tao. Naturally, he was different from ordinary people. Moreover, Feng Zichen was a Khanate god fiend. In the primordial world, which Khanate god fiend's physical body was not enormous and far beyond imagination. With the strength of cultivation, everything would become bigger until it was beyond imagination. This was the final inevitability of the cultivation path. No living creature could escape from it. Because Tao was great, big in all kinds of senses. If it was not big, it was not enough to inherit Tao. Therefore, the higher the cultivation, the bigger it had to be to inherit Tao. If the current Feng Zichen used the supreme divine power of the celestial phenomenon, his body would definitely be unimaginably big. When the size of 1,000,000 feet was magnified tens of thousands, or even tens of millions of times, the visual shock would be unimaginable. Looking at the world tree again, Feng Zichen found something different. In his eyes, the world tree was the same size as before. It had not changed at all. But that was not right. His body was tens of millions of times larger than before. The world tree should be even smaller in his eyes. As if he had thought of something, Feng Zichen's body suddenly changed. His size kept changing while he stared at the tree of world. But no matter how he changed, the figure of the world tree was always the same in his eyes. Primordial chaos as one. At this moment, Feng Zichen somewhat understood. Without him noticing, the world tree had obtained some benefits from great Tao and had already peeped into a trace of the mystery of the primordial chaos Tao realm. To use an analogy, the realm of the world tree was almost similar to Donghuang Tai. It was only one step away from the primordial chaos Tao realm. This was a great thing. If the world tree really stepped into the primordial chaos Tao realm, then Feng Zichen would have the ability to fight against the saints. When he did things, he would not have to be as restrained as he was today and use all kinds of schemes and tricks. One must know that if one had the strength to dominate everything, who would be willing to scheme all day long? If one used too many schemes and tricks, it was inevitable that one would be affected and become gloomy. What a great harvest! This opportunity came too suddenly. It was completely out of Feng Zichen's expectations. It gave people a dreamy feeling, as if they were in a dream. The chaos outside the realm was really his blessed land. Chapter 3:26. It seemed that every time Feng Zichen came to the outer realm chaos, he would obtain a shocking opportunity. If one were to think about it carefully, his current achievements were closely related to the great chaos outside the realm. It was not impossible to say that it was the outer realm chaos that made him successful. With this thought in mind, Feng Zichen wanted to stay here until he became primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian before returning. However, that was only his thought. No matter how good the outer realm chaos was, it was not a place for him to stay for long. The primordial world was his foundation. Over there were humans, there were goals that he worked hard for, and there were also people that he loved. These were all difficult to give up. Therefore, he wanted to go back. Without hesitation, Feng Zichen put away his Dharma treasure, passed through the door of chaos, and returned to the primordial world. East Sea, Seven Light State. Yoyu Shi, who was in seclusion, comprehending the great Tao, suddenly raised his eyebrows and opened his eyes. Two beams of divine light shot out and looked forward. "Who is it?" A loud shout came from Yoyu Shi's mouth. It shook the void and created layers of ripples, as if it was going to destroy everything. "It's me." In the void, Feng Zichen walked out with an inexplicable majesty. He destroyed the divine light and shattered the ripples. Everything returned to normal. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Seeing that it was Feng Zichen, Yoyu Shi hurriedly bowed. But how could Feng Zichen let him bow? Seeing this, he hurriedly stepped forward. Before he bowed, Feng Zichen stopped him with his hand and said anxiously, "Elder Yu, you're too kind. You're an elder and I'm a junior. How can I let you bow to me?" Even though Feng Zichen had become the human emperor, he was still very respectful to these first-generation humans. If it weren't for these people who fought for the human race in the primordial world surrounded by ferocious beasts, how could there be the birth of Feng Zichen and other human juniors? Therefore, every first-generation human was worthy of the respect and gratitude of later generations. Yu clan was the first generation of human beings, and one of the first generation of human beings to be born. After Suiren, there were 3 people from the Cho clan and the Z clan. He was the 4th human to be born. To be fair, the Yu clan had contributed a lot to the human race's success. Moreover, when Feng Zichen was young, the Yoyu clan took good care of him. When Suiren was busy, he would leave little Feng Zichen in the care of the Yoyu family. It could be said that the Yoyu family was indeed Feng Zichen's elder. "Your Majesty, what brings you here?" Seeing that she could no longer bow, Yoyu Shi smiled helplessly and asked Feng Zichen, "A few days ago, I was invited by a good friend to attend a banquet in the Eastern Sea. Now that the banquet is over, I thought of the 7 Planets Prefecture and wanted to come here to take a look. I also wanted to discuss some things with you." After returning from the chaos, Feng Zichen thought that since he was already here, he might as well go to the 7 Planets Prefecture to take a look. That was why he appeared in front of the Yuyu family. After all, ever since the new 7 Planets Prefecture was built, he had not come to take a look. It was indeed time to go over and take a look. At the same time, he could also build some teleportation arrays to facilitate their contact with the humans in other places. Otherwise, they would become estranged from the humans on the continent after not contacting for a long time. It would hurt the feelings of the humans. "What does Your Majesty think of the 7 Planets Prefecture?" Hearing this, the Yoyu family asked with some pride. Of course, he had the right to be proud. Under his rule, the 7 Planets Prefecture could be said to be the strongest force among the branches of the human race. "Of course, it's excellent." Nodding, Feng Zichen replied, He was very certain of the Yoyu family's ability. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thrown the 7 Luminaries province to the Yu clan after it was built and ignored it. This was the manifestation of his trust in the Yu family. In fact, it was also the case. The current situation of the 7 planets prefecture also proved the ability of the Yu family. The descent of the human king position also confirmed his contribution. Therefore, the Yoyu family was the human king. Judging from the power just now, Elder Yoyu is not far from attaining the Daluo Dao fruit, right? Thinking of the scene when he was discovered by the Yoyu family before he could say anything when he approached the 7 planets prefecture, Feng Zichen asked. Even if he did not restrain his aura, with his cultivation base, the Yoyu family would be able to detect him from so far away. It could be seen that the Yoyu family's improvement over the years was definitely not small. I have to thank Your Majesty for this. If not for the human king position refined by Your Majesty, I don't know how long it would take for me to reach my current realm. At this point, the Yoyu family's heart was filled with emotions. The opportunities in life were really wonderful. A moment ago, he was still worried about whether he would be able to cultivate to the half-step Daluo realm in this lifetime. But in the next moment, the human king position suddenly appeared, allowing him to see the hope of attaining the Daluo Jinxian. Fate was indescribably wonderful. The human king position was a Daluo Jinxian level position. It could allow its owner to possess the strength and realm of the Daluo Jinxian. He had already obtained the Daluo enlightenment in advance. If he still could not become the Daluo Jinxian, he could only be said to be trash. Obviously, the Yoyu family was not trash. In the years since he obtained the human king position, his cultivation base had advanced by leaps and bounds. He was only 1 step away from attaining the Daluo Jinxian. This was something that the Yoyu family had only dreamed of in the past. He knew his own situation. He was an ordinary innate life form, far inferior to Swearin and the other 2. The perfection of the Tai Jinxian was his limit. However, the appearance of the human king position changed his fate, giving him the hope of attaining the Daluo. In this way, how could the Yoyu family not be grateful to Feng Zichen? The grace of attaining the Dao was greater than the heavens. Elder Yoyu's contributions to the human race are obvious to everyone. That's why you were recognized by the human king position and became the human king. Otherwise, there are countless disciples of the human race. Why did the human king position choose you? It's because you deserve it. It doesn't have much to do with me. The Yoyu family had indeed relied on his own ability to become the human king, because the human king position chose its owner. Feng Zichen did not interfere. It was all chosen by them. Whatever Your Majesty says, it's what it is. Yes, the human king position was indeed obtained by him with his own ability. However, if Feng Zichen did not refine the human king position, no matter how strong he was, what was the use? However, seeing that Feng Zichen did not want to talk about this topic, the Yoyu family could not say anything more. Instead, he smiled and took the initiative to change the topic. There were some things that he just needed to remember in his heart. There was no point in saying it out loud. By the way, what did Your Majesty want to discuss with me? It just so happened that Feng Zichen had said that he had something to discuss with him. Elder Yoyu, have you noticed the recent changes in the East Sea? After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen said, the matter that he wanted to discuss with the Yoyu family was related to Penglai Sea City. Chapter 3:27. In order to achieve the great Tao, one could not lack Dharma, wealth, companions, and land. Among the 4, Dharma was the most important. The remaining 3 were equal. Dharma referred to the cultivation method. Only with the cultivation method could one step into the door of cultivation. This was the beginning of everything. Without a cultivation method, one could not enter the sect. Even if one lived in the Holy Land and had countless resources, it was useless. Therefore, Dharma was the most important. Wealth was divided into internal wealth and external wealth. Internal wealth referred to the capital one possessed, such as Dharma powers, merit, blessings, and so on. External wealth referred to all the expenses needed for cultivation, such as spiritual herbs, pills, and so on. Companions referred to like-minded fellow Taoists. Cultivation was not a safe thing. Therefore, one needed to have one or two friends to support each other on the path of the great Tao and improve together. Land referred to the cultivation, treasure trove. It could be a blessed land or a grotto heaven. Of course, the higher the grade, the better. These three were all used to assist in cultivation. Therefore, there was no difference between them. The human race did not lack Dharma. Feng Zichen did not lack Dharma Tao and mystical abilities. He even had several Tao scriptures that were born in the Khanate world. Moreover, he was the primordial sword ancestor, the fiend god Tao ancestor, and had all sorts of inheritances. Even the Grand Pure One had passed down the Tao of the Golden Core to the human race before he attained the Tao. Therefore, even the Khanate races that were stronger than the human race could not compare to him in terms of Dharma. In the untainted land, only a few hegemon level forces could suppress the human tribe in the aspect of law. The human race did not lack companions. How should he put it? The human race did not lack people the most. In fact, they were overflowing. Therefore, with the huge base of the human race, it was not too difficult to find a few like-minded fellow Taoists to comprehend the great Tao together. In that case, there were companions. On the ground, the human race had the Zichen Grotto Heaven below them and the human Tao Imperial Court above them. They were all top-notch holy lands in the primordial world. Therefore, the human race did not lack Dharma either. Only wealth was what the human race lacked the most. In terms of wealth, Feng Zichen could be ranked among the top in the primordial world. But just because he was rich did not mean that the human race was also rich. In the end, the birth of the human race was still a little late. They missed out on too many opportunities because Khanate numinous treasures were everywhere. In addition, it had only been 1,000,000 years since the birth of the human race, and they had not accumulated any deep foundation. Poverty was understandable. Which of the great clans of the great desolate world did not possess countless resources? This was the foundation for the rise of a large clan. In order to achieve the great Tao, magic, wealth, companionship, and land were all indispensable. Similarly, if one wanted to become a big clan, one could not do without magic, wealth, companions, and land. Feng Zichen already possessed all four of them. Humans, on the other hand, lacked wealth. Therefore, Feng Zichen had to think of a way to make the human race rich. If everyone in the human race could use the creation Tao pill to cultivate, in that case, why would the human race worry about not being able to prosper? The birth of the teleportation array disk is a major event that can change the primordial world. How can I not know? Xianqing had caused such a huge commotion in the Eastern Sea. Even if the Yoyu clan was blind and deaf, they would have noticed it. Ahem, I mean Penglai City. Elder Yoyu, what do you think of it? Seeing that the Yoyu clan did not understand what he meant, Feng Zichen coughed lightly and asked again. As a trade center, Penglai City might be able to help the human race accumulate wealth quickly. Penglai City, that place is indeed not bad. Many treasures that are only rumored can be bought there. It can be said that it is a gathering place for cultivators from all over the primordial world. It can be considered the place with the most complete collection of materials in the primordial world. Obviously, the Yoyu clan had a good impression of Penglai City. His tone was full of praise. He must have bought some treasures that he liked there. Elder, what do you think will happen if I open a Penglai City in the human race? Looking at the Yoyu clan, Feng Zichen asked seriously. This idea was born uncontrollably after he saw the prosperity of Penglai City. If he opened a similar market in the human race, wealth would gather from all directions. It would be difficult for the human race not to become rich. Yes, Your Majesty. It's not like you don't know that the human race lacks resources. The primordial world is dangerous. Without good treasures, who would risk their lives to come to the human race? Therefore, even if this market can be opened, it's useless. It won't attract people. After thinking for a while, the Yoyu clan answered. The Penglai Sea City could be opened because the East Sea was rich in resources and attracted a large number of living beings on land. After that, Xianqing even brought the disciples of the Jia school to set up teleportation arrays in the East Sea, making it convenient for everyone to travel. Only then did the Penglai Sea City become prosperous. But what did the human race have? They had nothing. Not to mention setting up teleportation arrays, they couldn't even take out the resources to attract others. Elder, you must be joking. The human race lacks resources, but the East Sea doesn't. We can sell the resources of the East Sea to the human race to attract various forces. When there are more people, this market will naturally prosper. There are countless living beings in the primordial world. How many of them can go to the East Sea? There must be more living beings who don't know the riches of the East Sea. And these living beings are our targets. Since he dared to say it, Feng Zichen naturally had a complete plan in his heart. He had considered many aspects. What about the teleportation array? The Yoyu clan asked. Compared to the East Sea, the primordial world was more boundless and dangerous. If these problems could not be solved, all of Feng Zichen's plans would be like castles in the air that would shatter at the first touch. This is not difficult. I can ask ancestral Magus Dijiang to build a teleportation array in the primordial world. He will not refuse such a thing that is beneficial to the primordial world. As for safety, then let's build the market in East City. That place is adjacent to Mount Shaoyang and is right under the nose of the Grand Pure One. I don't believe that anyone would dare to cause trouble there. Feng Zichen was confident. He had a solution to the Yoyu clan's worries. It's good that Your Majesty knows what to do. Since Feng Zichen was so confident, the Yoyu clan couldn't say anything. Anyway, if this matter failed, the human race wouldn't lose anything. If it succeeded, the human race would make a huge profit. Elder, you're in the East Sea. I'll have to trouble you to collect resources in the East Sea. Take these Connate creation pills first. If it's not enough, ask me for more. As he spoke, Feng Zichen took out a bottle of Connate creation pills and handed it to the Yoyu clan. He had taken it from Xianqing. There were about 10,000 creation Dao pills. I have a relationship with the Dragon Palace and Jia School. Take my keepsake. I don't think you will encounter any trouble. Afraid that the Yoyu clan would encounter trouble, Feng Zichen reminded them again. With Xianqing's help on the sea and the dragon race's help under the sea, as long as they didn't encounter a top-notch great divine ability, they could already do whatever they wanted in the East Sea. Chapter 328. It's all for the human race. There's nothing to worry about. Receiving the creation Dao pill, Yoyu replied. Yoyu had some understanding of Feng Zichen's wealth. He could refine the vast human Dao imperial court on his own. A mere 10,000 creation Dao pills were nothing to him. Then I'll leave it to you, Elder. I still need to make a trip to East City to discuss the specific matters of establishing the market with the Eong clan. I won't stay here for long, Elder. The resources of the East Ocean could be sold to the land, and the resources on the land could also be sold to the East Ocean. Coincidentally, after all these years of development, the human race was distributed widely and could collect all kinds of resources. If these resources were sold to the East Ocean, they would definitely make a huge profit. With the Jia school and the dragon race, no matter what the human race transported, they would not have to worry about sales. This was a long-term business path that could accumulate a large amount of resources for the human race, and all of these had to pass through E-City. Feng Zichen planned to turn E-City into the largest shopping mall in the primordial world. He planned to gather all the factions and develop a business path. The business path, the path of wealth. After mastering this path, it was only a matter of time before he became the richest man in the primordial world. Moreover, with the business path in hand, coupled with the path of currency, it would definitely produce unimaginable changes. Feng Zichen was looking forward to that day. "Don't worry, Your Majesty. I'm here in the East Ocean." The words "I'm here in the East Ocean" represented the confidence of the Yoyu clan. With him around, everything in the East Ocean would be arranged properly. "Of course I'm at ease with the elder handling things." Nodding, Feng Zichen took a step forward and rushed towards E-City. Rumble. Outside E-City, the void suddenly trembled as layers of ripples appeared. It was like a huge wave that rose and fell. At the same time, in the depths of the void, in the mysterious, unknown place, the river of destiny that had been calm for many years once again stirred. It appeared from the unknown place and arrived above E-City. The river of destiny appeared in the world. Such a huge commotion was rare in the primordial world. Naturally, it attracted the attention of the mighty figures of the primordial world. Who is confirming the Tao? What a huge commotion! It actually attracted the river of destiny to descend. With such a rare phenomenon, his future achievements will be limitless. I'm afraid another great magician is about to rise. For ordinary people, the river of destiny would only tremble slightly when they confirmed their Tao. How could it be like today, directly appearing and descending into the world? Only those who were shockingly talented would receive this type of treatment to show how extraordinary they were. Those who had received such treatment in the past and had survived until now had all become great mystical abilities and stood proudly at the peak of the primordial world. In other words, the person who had proven his Tao today had the possibility of becoming a great medium. In the untainted land, experts from the early stage to the late stage of the pre-saint realm were called Almighty. Experts at the great perfection of pre-saint realm and half-step chaotic primes were known as great divinities. Even the weakest among the great divinities was a great perfection demi-saint. Thus, it could be seen how extraordinary those who had proven their Tao were. As the river of destiny descended, the void outside E-City trembled even more violently. It was like a huge vortex that wanted to tear everything apart. Feng Zichen, who was hurrying through the void, was inevitably affected. Unlucky! With a low cry, Feng Zichen paused and walked out of the void. It's Yang. He's proving his Tao. But how can he be so fast? Also, why is his Tao confirmation phenomenon so grand? Directly attracting the river of destiny to descend is a treatment that only top Khanate god fiends who have proven their Tao. It shouldn't be. As soon as he walked out of the void, Feng Zichen looked up and saw Yang standing in the sky above the river of destiny, receiving the baptism of the laws of heaven and earth. He had proven his Tao. He had cultivated the Daluo Jinxian Tao fruit and was immortal from now on, free and unfettered. But how was this possible? At this moment, Feng Zichen was pleasantly surprised. He was happy that Yi-Ong had proven his Tao and added another Daluo Taoist priest to the human race. His strength had greatly improved. He was shocked that Yi-Ong had only obtained the position of the human king for tens of thousands of years. How could he go from the Tai Jinxian to the Daluo Jinxian? This was too fast. It was even faster than Feng Zichen. There was not even a process of accumulation, and he directly became the Daluo Jinxian. One had to know that in order to cultivate the 5 Qis unifications and prove his Tao, Daluo Jinxian, Feng Zichen had traveled all over the 4 extremities and devoured a large amount of innate essences. Only then was he able to save enough essences. However, Eong seemed to have skipped these processes and directly completed the last step, and he had proven his Tao in the highest state. This was too incredible. A purple light appeared in Feng Zichen's eyes, dyeing his eyes purple. He was extremely noble, and endless laws appeared in them. In an instant his temperament changed. He became high and mighty, like the heavenly Tao, full of coldness and ruthlessness. Tao-I, the real Tao-I. As the saying goes, Tao gave birth to Wuji, and Wuji gave birth to Yin and Yang. Feng Zichen was the Tao body of Pangu. His eyes were the sun and moon, Yin and Yang, containing the truth of Yin and Yang. As for Xianqing, he had once observed the connate treasure, Tai Chi diagram, and comprehended the Tao of Tai Chi from it. With the help of Hongmeng Daozhong, Feng Zichen combined the truth of Yin and Yang and the Tao of Tai Chi, understood the true essence of connate Yin and Yang, and understood the changes of Yin and Yang. He used the sun and moon to develop Wuji, and used Wuji to develop the heavenly Tao. After cultivating a pair of Tao eyes, he could see through all illusions and see through all mysteries. He had boundless divine power, just like the eyes of the heavenly Tao. Not to mention that Feng Zichen did not understand the heavenly Tao. His North Star clone was known as the incarnation of the heavenly Tao. He controlled the authority of thunder and had the ability to destroy all things. That was the most essential power of the heavenly Tao. Moreover, the Ziwei star was formed from the birthplace of the heavenly Tao. Great Emperor Ziwei was originally from the same sect as the heavenly Tao. With all kinds of karma added together, Feng Zichen's understanding of the heavenly Tao could definitely be ranked in the top 3 in the primordial world, second only to Pangu and Hongjun. This pair of Tao eyes truly had the same ability as the heavenly Tao. However, because Feng Zichen's strength was low, it was far from being as powerful as the heavenly Tao. Under the Tao eyes, nothing could hide. In Feng Zichen's eyes, a layer of golden light appeared on Yang's body with the charm of immortality. It was gradually changing his Tao body, making it closer to perfection. That was the immortal Tao light. However, this immortal Tao light did not belong to Eong, but to the 9 transformations golden pill. Eong had swallowed the 9 transformations golden pill. What a great opportunity! What a great creation! At this moment, Feng Zichen understood everything. Why was Eong able to attain the Tao of Daluo Jingxian so quickly? Moreover, he did not need to accumulate. It was because he had swallowed the 9 transformations golden pill. That was the 9 transformations golden pill that the Grand Pure One used to deduce the Tao of the golden pill. It could be said to be the source of the Tao of the golden pill. It had great merit and great luck. That was not the 9 transformations golden pill. It was clearly a Daluo Tao fruit. Anyone who ate it could immediately become a Daluo. Chapter 329. Eong had eaten the 9 revolutions golden pill to ascend to the heavens in one step and prove the Tao of Daluo. Not only that, this 9 revolutions golden pill was the source of the Tao of the golden core. Eating it was equivalent to becoming half a Tao master of the Tao of the golden core. When the Tao of the golden core flourished in the future, there would be supreme providence gathering. If Eong could seize this opportunity, it would not be difficult for her to become a powerful person. It was from the future that she saw this possibility that the river of fate would descend to show Eong's extraordinariness. What was a heaven-defying opportunity? This was it. Feng Zichen still vaguely remembered that when he asked Eong to go to Mount Shoyang to try the opportunity, Eong's indifferent look. But he did not expect that in the end, this heaven-defying opportunity would still fall on his head. Heaven's will was unpredictable. At this moment, Feng Zichen's heart surged with ecstasy. He was not happy for himself, but for the Eong clan. The significance of the 9 revolutions golden pill was not as simple as proving the Tao of Daluo Jingxian. It also represented the fate with the Grand Pure One. After all, this 9 revolutions golden pill was refined by the Grand Pure One. It was the most successful pill that he had refined and represented his highest achievement in the Tao of alchemy. A pill that could allow one to directly prove the Tao of Daluo, such a heaven-defined treasure. He did not know if he could still refine it in the future. Now, if Eong went to the 8 Visions Palace to become a disciple, the Grand Pure One might not necessarily refuse. He would most likely agree directly. This was fate set by the heavens. He sat at home while his disciple came from the heavens. It was in line with the Grand Pure One's philosophy of governing by doing nothing. Thinking of this, Feng Zichen moved and was about to rush to Yang's side to persuade her to go to the 8 Visions Palace to become a disciple. In public, if Yang became the disciple of the Grand Pure One, it would definitely be of great benefit to the human race. Just by relying on the name of the Grand Pure One, she did not need to do anything to intimidate some small fry. In private, as a good friend of Yang, Feng Zichen naturally hoped that Yang would become the disciple of the Grand Pure One. In this way, his future was guaranteed, and he was destined to become a great magician. Whether it was for public or private reasons, it was beneficial for the Yang clan to acknowledge the Grand Pure One as their master. Feng Zichen naturally had to persuade him. Back then, it was also here that the Grand Pure One wanted to take Feng Zichen as his disciple, but he was rejected. On the one hand, he was concerned about the human race. On the other hand, he was worried about Nuwa's dissatisfaction. However, these were not the main reasons. The main reason was that Xianqing had already joined the Kunlun Mountain. It was one thing to hide one's identity and become a disciple of a sage, but it was another thing to become a disciple of 2 sages. If the former was the case, considering their many years of relationship as master and disciple, he might just reprimand it would be over. At most, he would be expelled from the sect as a form of punishment. His life would not be in danger. However, if the latter were to be exposed, it would be a huge sin. Wouldn't that be fooling the saints? The 3 pure ones would explode with anger. They would lose their face and become the laughingstock of the primordial world. At that time, Feng Zichen would have to face the anger of 2 sages. Oh no, it would be the anger of 3 sages of the same sect. If the 3 pure ones joined forces, even Hongjun would be afraid. Heaven and earth would be terrified. Almost no one in the primordial world could compare. If that really happened, even if Feng Zichen achieved the primordial chaos Tao fruit, he might not end up well. Therefore, even if he had countless clones, one was enough for him to acknowledge a saint as his master. If he had more, it would not be acknowledging a master, but causing trouble. After all, no one could guarantee that the clones would not be seen through for the rest of their lives. In the primordial world, nothing could be hidden forever. No matter how well you did, there would always be all kinds of accidents that would expose you. It was simply poisonous. Otherwise, how could there be so many secrets about the world in the legends of later generations? It was better to be honest. If Xianqing had not already acknowledged the Grand Master of Heaven as his master, given Feng Zichen's temperament back then, when he heard that the Grand Pure One wanted to accept him as his disciple, he would immediately run over and call him master. It was not that he was unwilling, but that he could not. Therefore, seeing that Eong had obtained this opportunity, Feng Zichen was very concerned. Today it would be fine if he agreed. If he was unwilling to acknowledge the Grand Pure One as his master, Feng Zichen would tie him up. If he missed such an opportunity, he would definitely regret it for the rest of his life. However, before Feng Zichen could reach Yang's side, he saw a large amount of purple gas suddenly surging out of the surrounding void. It was vast and mighty, spanning more than 30,000 miles. The Grand Pure One was here. The purple gas spanned 30,000 miles. Such a phenomenon was the phenomenon of a saint traveling. And the only saint who would descend for this matter was the Grand Pure One. As expected, a white-haired old man appeared beside Eong at some point in time. He stood there quietly and looked at Eong silently without any sense of awkwardness. It was as if he had been there from the beginning. Although this old man looked old, he did not give people the feeling of being old. Instead, he gave people the feeling of being abnormally young and abnormally great. That old was not true old. It was the precipitation of time, the traces of the great Tao. This was the Grand Pure One, the first saint of the 6 saints. He stood there quietly, but he seemed to have become one with the world and become the center of the universe. "Greetings, Grand Pure One." Eong bowed slightly and said, "Are you willing to acknowledge the Poor Way as your master?" After a long while, the Grand Pure One said, "Disciple Eong greets Master." Without hesitation, Eong immediately bowed to the Grand Pure One. "Acknowledge the saint as your master," or "acknowledge the Grand Pure One as your master." One had to know that the Grand Pure One had never taken in a disciple. If Eong became his disciple, he would be his eldest and only disciple. This was such a great opportunity that others could not even ask for it. Eong was not a fool. How could he refuse? All right. Seeing this scene, the Grand Pure One smiled slightly. Obviously, he was in a good mood. "Since you have entered the celestial sect of wonders, the name of the mortal world is no longer suitable. I will give you a new Taoist name. From now on, you will be called Xuandu." After thinking for a while, the Grand Pure One said, "The current Taoist name was different from the future. In the future, a Taoist name was a Taoist name. It was just a name. However, it was different now. A Taoist name was a divine name. Not only did it contain magical power, but it also contained luck. For example, the 3 pure ones, Dijun, Taiyi, and others, their names were all conferred by the world. They all had endless meanings and symbolized the origin of the world. The name Eong was ordinary. It did not have any special meaning, nor did it have any magical power. It was just a name to distinguish him from others. However, Xuandu was different. Xuandu was the Tao. Xuandu was the Tao capital. This was a divine name that only Khanate god fiends had. With the name Xuandu, one could naturally inherit supreme luck. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.